As and I would like to give you an official welcome to our Ionian expedition. For anybody that's been on trips with us before, you know that flexibility is like the first survival skill.
Right.
Because what we have our programs that are planned, but we need to work that around what the sites are. We're going to places that we've never been to before, and we have to accommodate what's there. So you may find that we'll get everything, all the workshops that are scheduled, you will get them, but they may be not in the order or in the space that we originally intended. So far this looks good for the first one. The ones that we were going to do yesterday, it was just going to be an introductory talk yesterday that was pushed back until today because of the people that weren't going to be there yet, the people that were coming in from Ireland and things. We wanted to make sure that they were there to hear everything before we started. Now, today what we're going to try to accomplish in the time that we have here are two things, yesterday's program and today's. The first part that we're going to do is the briefing on basically the technologies that we're using, just for the people who haven't been a part of what we've been doing before. So, so you don't think that we're absolute lunatics when we start, singing and doing odd things. We'll explain to you at least the rudimentary basics of what that's about. By the time we get done with the workshops that are going to be held in rooms, with official workshops, hopefully with overheads, yes? Yes, Mylars and everything. Okay, yeah. Transparencies. You will, by the end of all of that, it will make a whole lot more sense to you. But for now, I just want to give you a basic briefing on the technologies that we're using. We call them the God languages. They're the languages of light and symbol and sound. When we talk about light, symbol, and sound, we don't do it in the classic New Age airheaded way, because there's a lot of New Age stuff out there saying, oh, everything's, the light body, this, the light sound body, yada-da. They don't tell you what that is. We do tell you what that is. When we're talking about light and symbol and sound and color, we are working with wave spectra that go with what are called shields. Now, the word shields is an ancient word. It's a translation of an ancient word that refers to the templates upon which matter accretes or manifests itself. They're the templates behind matter. They're made of light and sound waves, but very much more particular than just light or sound waves. They're made of what are called scalar standing waves. These are waves of light that are columnar waves, little tiny points of waves that flash off and on. They don't move this way or that way, or move from this place to that place. They are little points that flash on and become waves, and then flash back off and become vibrations. So they go from vibration to oscillation. When they're on, when a standing wave is on, it is in its oscillation form. When it turns off, it is in its vibration form. When it is in its vibration form, it is sound. When it is in its oscillation form, it is light. So light becomes sound, becomes light, becomes sound. The basic units of consciousness that everything is made out of takes the form of scalar standing waves. Now, in some of the other courses, we've gotten very much into detail, explaining to you what dimensions are, explaining to you the basic units or carriers of consciousness, which are units called partikai, partiké, and particum. These are the basic unit carriers of consciousness, the consciousness of Source, that takes on the form of partikai, partiké, particum. From that point, it accretes or pulls together into like patterns that form what are called chelons. Chelons are groups of partiké, partikai, and particum that are the carriers of the thrust of consciousness. They are the carriers of consciousness that form these standing scalar wave grids. Now, a scalar standing wave is made of chelons. It is made of partikai, partiké, and particum that build up to be chelons. And a template for manifestation is made out of many, many, many scalar standing waves. We talk about chelontic science. We are referring to the science of chelons, which is the science of the primal units of consciousness, and how they form, how they group mathematically to form the templates of matter and consciousness. Matter and consciousness are made of energy. Energy is all conscious. Now, a lot of you have already heard this, and some of you haven't, so I'm trying to give a really quick overview for the people who haven't, without boring the other guys to death who already know all this stuff. When we are dealing with the technologies that you hear us doing songs, and you will at times find us using symbols, and we will be running certain colors sometimes, you're running energies in the body. This is done very specifically with a very detailed understanding of the shields, or the scalar templates, upon which matter forms are built. the scalar templates create, first of all, what is called the unified field, and that's the cosmos. That is the scalar template, or energy wave grid, that everything in the universe forms on. And within that structure, all of the other smaller things. First you have the cosmos structure. Within that you'll have smaller universes. Within that you'll have galaxies and planets and suns, and within those you'll have life systems. We're a part of a life system, a planetary system that's part of a galactic system, that's part of a universal system, that's part of a cosmic system. When we get into the Dance for Love program, we'll understand more about that framework, very specifically, more about the templates that we are connected to. These are our connection to God. These are our connection to Source. Because these templates are living forms of consciousness. Right now, if we could perceive ourselves the way the God part of ourselves perceives itself, we would know that we are standing scalar wave patterns. Right now, we see a hologram, the hologram of matter, that's created by standing scalar wave patterns of consciousness bending in certain ways and refracting off itself, so it can see itself in objectification. In truth, we're all residing within the source and force that we call God. Everything in manifestation is not outside of God. God didn't choose to create something and then put it outside of itself. It created itself inside. So everything exists within God. You can't be away from God. God is everywhere. But you can be away from the remembering of what that means. You can be away from understanding that you have that relationship with God or Source. Now, we talk about science and divine science. We do this in a very spiritual way, but we do not insult science in order to justify spirituality, nor do we insult spirituality in order to justify science. They go hand in hand. Source, God, is very, very scientific, is also very, very spiritual all at the same time. So there are a lot of paradigms of belief that come together in the work that we teach. There are a lot of teachings that are, people might consider confrontational compared to some of the other things that are out there. And there's a reason for that. There's a confrontation taking place in this space and time. The teachings that we bring here aren't something somebody invented in this generation. These teachings, the last time they were brought here, were put into texts, into books, called the Maharata texts. They were written books. They were translated off a set of discs called cloister doratura plates, the CDD plates. These were pre-Atlantean technologies, advanced technologies, that when you see the discs, they're very small little discs, and they are memory storage devices, among other things. They have had the history. They have recorded the history for the last 950 billion years in this time matrix. They have recorded that history, including Earth's history. We were given a set of these plates, our races, in 246,000 BC. And from that period, there evolved here cultures, Christos cultures, that were based on what's called the Lyran-Syrian Christos model of civilization. It's a free Christos society structure. That was our heritage here. Humans were created as a part of that structure. Now, I'm not going to go into human creation here. We've covered all of this stuff heavily in other workshops. What I want to do is give us a basic orientation to what the technologies are that we're using, so you can understand perhaps that they are both sacred and holy in the spiritual sense, but they are also very, very state-of-the-art and beyond as far as science goes. The stuff that science likes to use right now to invalidate spirituality, the paradigm of science that we've been given with these teachings, it blows that out of the water. They have no argument left. This shows you where your soul is. This shows you where the parts of yourself that seem vague because we don't have the teachings here anymore. These are the teachings that we once knew by heart. All of us knew them. We didn't even have to have them on the outside because we all knew this consciously. It was direct cognition. The teachings are being brought back now because they were progressively raped from our cultures. They were taken away from us purposely by forces that did not work the Christos agenda. The last large time that happened was between 25,500 BC and 9,558 BC, which was a period in Atlantean history, and that wasn't the only period in Atlantean history. Atlantis is much older than that, but that was the, let's say, the karma that we're trying to unravel right now really began there, with a series of events that took place that culminated in us having our history wiped away, having most of the remnants of Atlantean civilization purposely house-cleaned off this planet. So the people who remained here would have no history, no memory, so they would be very easy to reprogram and to turn them into something they were never intended to be. Now, this workshop isn't about going into, heavily, the history because we have done this before. We have covered a whole series of events that took place since 25,500 BC, and we have covered a whole series of events that took place way before that, from 250 billion years ago, in what happened when what was called the Lyran-Syrian Wars, all the way up to the present time. So the history is there for people who want to know more about it. It's there in some of the other publications. More of it's coming. What's most important for us right now is to get an overview orientation of where are we? Like, all right, in this cosmic scheme of things, where are we in this time frame? How can we personally find purpose within that? Is there something we can do to help the Christos agenda, which is the agenda of freedom and eternal life? There is an agenda that is called the Christos agenda that will lead us toward the original form of which we had, which was eternal life. We did not have to die. Death is not a natural condition to human beings. It is a condition of mutation, genetic mutation, that was placed upon us and not by God. All right. Right now, we're learning technologies that will progressively bring back to us what our original genetic imprint has been. It will progressively bring back to us the ability to move into places and spaces that we long ago forgot existed. This is what the workshops are going to be when we get into the, when we're in the rooms, we have a little bit more comfortable spaces to sit. We're going to get into these new places and spaces and what it means to be able to visit those places and spaces, not just with your minds, but with your bodies, what it takes to do that. Because these places and spaces, one of them called Kemelotahi, are places that we came from originally. They're our homelands, and they are very intimately connected to Earth. Now, when we're doing site work, I want to get, for this particular discussion, I want to focus upon just getting across an understanding of the technologies we're using. When we use the songs that we use, they sound like songs or tones or gibberish with a nice melody to some people. First of all, I'd like to clarify that the words that you might not have heard ever before as words or that you remember are of what's called the Anahazi language. That was the first written and spoken language. It's the language of the Elohai Elohim. And it was the first language in this time matrix, not just on this planet. All other languages, spoken and objectified languages, were derived from the Anahazi language. It's the original language. The reason that many of the songs that we are given in the original language is because our DNA is keyed to the sound tones and vibrations of that original language. So are the planetary grids. Now, I've talked briefly about scalar shields. The shields, those templates that matter is built upon. We have our own personal set of shields that we've talked about when we get into the anatomy. We talk about them. We'll touch on that again in the workshop. So I do that. I'm sorry to bore the people who have been here over and over, but with the new people, I try to give you a basic on the anatomy because it's a key element of the teaching. You'll get that stuff when we get into the bigger workshop. But for now, if we can understand, we have a set of shields or scalar wave templates that our body and our consciousness is built on. Our body is built on it, and it is actually the form that our consciousness takes in order to enter this hologram that we call three-dimensional life. The planet also has a set of scalar shields, of standing wave grids. When people talk about doing grid work, and when they talk about portals and vortices and these kind of things, what they are talking about are elements of the manifestation of this template, the scalar wave template that the planetary matter base is built upon. What's interesting about the shields is in the unified field of universal consciousness or cosmic consciousness, you have these shields all in the same place. All right, if we look at ourselves as having a set of shields, picture them as for now, just picture it as like a disk of energy. And that's your imprint, your scalar wave pattern that has the very specific mathematical codings that make up what becomes the shape of your body, the type of being you chose to become. All right, you have a scalar shield. Now, your scalar shield exists within a larger one that is the planetary scalar shield. The scalar shield of the planet is a part of a larger one called the galactic shield. Now, all the places that we see space between objects, like we're on planet Earth, and we know way, way, way out there is the sun and the other planets and stuff. The space that we see nothing in, there are still scalar template in there. We are unified. All things are unified through this. When we work with the light and sound technologies, we are working with the scalar shields directly. There is grid work that's being taught out there in other veins that teaches you utterly nothing about the scalar templates. They teach you how to do certain things without teaching you what you're affecting, because there are certain things being done on this planet that are messing with the natural planetary divine blueprint, which is the divine blueprint of the scalar shield, the original imprint this planet was supposed to carry. This is not new. This has been going on for many, many eons, people trying to mess with these particular planetary grids. And they're not people from here, most of them. They're people from other places. Places that we've got into in other workshops as well. We'll get into that when we talk about the secrets of Metatron. In that workshop, we'll talk more about, I'll give a recap for the people who don't know what the word Wisadek means and who don't know what the word Phantom Matrix means. You'll find that out in the Metatron workshop and beyond that. But for right now, we're on a mission. It's the original mission that humans were put on this planet for. Humans were an angelic race. They were not created as a fallen, sinful race. They were a race of angels that was put here to guard this planet and to protect its shields and help restore them and heal them, because they had been damaged by races that we refer to as the fallen angelic races. The fallen angelic races, once upon a time, were part of the original creation. However, they made decisions and choices that created a fate for themselves that was very unfortunate. They created a situation where, in rebelling against their connection to Source, they genetically altered themselves in a way that they could no longer hold the higher frequencies of consciousness that connect us all to Source. So they decided to become masters of the universe themselves, and they tried to take over other universes in order to feed on them. Right now, what we're dealing with is a situation that for many thousands of years, this planet has been under siege. And there has been a deadline to that siege. There has been a time that was waited for, and the Bible told us about this time. It was a time when the stargates would open, the planetary stargates, the portions of the planetary scalar template that open between this space-time place and other space-time places in the higher heavens. This is that time. We've gotten into, in other workshops, then it's in print also, if anybody wants to read it, the information on a stellar activation cycle, how they happen every 26,556 years, and how this is the time period when, ever since Atlantis, it was known this was when the next one was going to occur. There were plans made in Atlantis for this time period. There were plans made on both sides, the sides working the Christos agenda and the sides working the not Christos agenda, or if you want to call it the anti-Christos agenda. Right now, those forces are all back on planet. We're all here, both sides. And interestingly, most of the people are asleep. They don't remember the Atlantean times. They don't remember the agreements they came here to be a part of. They don't know what forces are moving them, or moving with them, or moving through them. That makes people very vulnerable right now, and it makes the planet very vulnerable, because there are things here that we don't see unless we learn to use our inner eyes and our ancient eyes, and there are things going on that we need to be aware of if we're going to be able to maintain integrity in our own personal being, with the integrity of our own divine blueprint, and also to assist the planet to do that. The work that we do in all of the things, we call them planetary shields clinics, because what we're doing is going around and assisting by running frequency. We're assisting the Christos frequency to run back into the planetary grids. When I talk about Christos frequency, I'm not using that in a vague way. We teach a 15-dimensional structure in Keylontic science, which is the original teachings of the founders' teachings here. It is the basic structure of the way creation is in this universe. There is a scientific structure to it. 15-dimensional physics is what we teach. D12 level is the Christos frequency level. That is the place of pre-matter. That is the place where the divine blueprint exists. There are places higher than that in frequency, but it is through that place that all things are unified and that manifestation comes into being. So D12 frequency, pure D12 frequency, is the divine blueprint frequency. It's called the Maharata frequency, and that means the Christos, or inner Christos. It is the Christos lifeline that links us all to the higher God worlds and to Source. This is why a lot of the translations came down through the Bible and things like that, that Christ is your Savior and your link to God. It was referring much more to the fact that the inner Christos frequency that we all have the ability to carry within our bodies, it's our divine blueprint template that links us directly to Source. The planet has a Christos frequency potential, so does the galaxy and the universe. They were all created through that potential. But things have happened to the scalar templates down here on this planet that have made it so that over the last 25,500 years, the planet could not run D12 frequency, which made it very, very vulnerable to infiltration from lower fallen angelic kingdoms, and that is what has taken place here. When we move through our planetary shields clinics, we come on a mission of love and simply of assisting the universe and Source, God, to restore the Christos frequencies. Our bodies are conduits of energy. The type of energy we carry will depend on, first of all, how much we know about our anatomy. If we don't know we have chakras, if we don't know that we have a scalar template, if we don't know we have auric field levels and how to keep them clean, how to keep them in integrity, we're not going to know what to do with ourselves. We're going to be easy game for things that live, let's say, in the D4 astral plane, that want to attach to your fields and use your fields for something that you might not even know they're using it for. So we teach you how to do basic protection when we're doing Maharic Seal, for example. Maharic Seal, the Maharada current, the D12 current. You're running D12, natural D12 frequency into your body. Not from me, not from somebody else, right from you, from your own template. You're reawakening your own inner Christos. That is a protection field, as well as a lot of other things that are wonderful. But you will get protection, and this is how you get field integrity out of it. When we do Shields clinics, the first thing we start with is making sure our own fields are running the Christos frequency, so we don't run anything distorted into the planetary grids that we didn't know was there. We begin with that. When we use light sound technologies, we also use symbols. If you've seen some of the symbol codes in your packages, and for those of you who've been through this, know this part, just so you can ignore me. But for those of you who it doesn't make sense to, the symbols are what we see as a symbol on a piece of paper is a very specific mathematical program, a multi-dimensional, multi-layer mathematical program. It is a visual representation of a specific set of scalar wave patterns that go directly with the planetary shields and also with our personal body shields. When we use the very specific symbols that are given to us by the Iani races, which are the representatives of the founders races that are from inner Earth at this time, when we use these symbols, we are reawakening the mathematical programs that are part of the planetary divine blueprint. We are also reawakening our own, those mathematical codings within ourselves. When we use the symbols, which are light technologies, because they are about visual, all right? We are seeing them. We are using light. If it's something you can see, instead you can hear the tones and you can see the symbols, you are working with light frequency. You are working with oscillation. You are sending frequency in, and it's oscillating down into your DNA template, and that's going down into the Earth and oscillating into the planetary shields and creating an effect. Now, the effects are designated by these symbols. These symbols are actually in the Earth shields. They're actually in your DNA template shields. So it's not that you're taking in something that you don't have already, but by using it on the outside and bouncing it back off yourself, you're stimulating it into activation. So the symbols that we are given by the Iani are the symbols that have to do with our own programming. They're already in there. It's just a matter of being aware of them so we can more rapidly wake ourselves up. If we were to leave ourselves alone right now and there was not anything out there bothering us or trying to mess with this planet, it would take us probably about 2,000 years to get to the point where we would naturally evolve to understanding these type of technologies. But right now, we're in what's called the Christos realignment mission and the crisis intervention mission, because there are major things happening on this planet right now, and not just on this planet. There are things happening in this 15-dimensional system that, ever since Atlantis, it was known they could possibly take place during this time. There was much work done by the Guardian races to try to prevent them from taking place at this time, so things wouldn't be so chaotic here, or as chaotic as they possibly could get. Things are not going horribly well with the original plan of everything go peaceful. All the fallen angelics decide they don't want to be fallen anymore. They agree to work with, the Guardian races. It isn't going that way. Right now, we're going to use technologies these are a gift. It's very hard sometimes for me to convey the meaning behind it. Even to put into words for myself, the level of gratitude that I personally feel, and I know Az feels the same, and people that have been working with him a bit and start to really get a feel for what we're doing, that's been there for them too, I think. There's a gratitude of realizing the level of technology we've been given and the freedom that will eventually give us if we take it and use it. These technologies are the beginning of our freedom. They're the beginning of helping us to remember, first of all, who we are, how our bodies work, how our souls work, what it all means, and how to begin to recreate the Christos civilization on this planet. Because what's running this planet for the last 25,000 years is not the Christos intention at all. If you look at the societies, if you look at our known history and see what that history has been about, it has been about one group exploiting another group, one group massacring another group, one group forcing their beliefs down another group's throat, one group trying to obliterate another group to get land. It was all about land. land because stargates are in certain locations. We've given the locations of those stargates on this planet, and there's going to be more of the portals that go with them that are going to be given before too long as well. Stargate territories were always on this planet since the invasions took place from the fallen angelics. They were always places where groups invaded groups, because certain groups on the planet were motivated by certain groups of fallen angelics. Now, fallen angelics don't all get along with each other. They've been fighting with each other for many millennia, and they pick on races that they can get to be their little foot soldiers. What has happened on Earth since Atlantis is we have had a race of beings called the Leviathan races that have been bred here through an experiment that went wrong. The experiment was the Guardian races had allowed in one of the fallen angelic collectives on what's called bioregenesis, which is regeneration of their DNA template so they could evolve to get their Christos potential back. They entered something called the Emerald Covenant, which is a Christos coevolution agreement. The certain groups of the fallen races agreed to be a part of the Emerald Covenant. They wanted to re-evolve back into the Christos pattern and to get their DNA back together so they could hold Christos frequency. There was a small group of them that was permitted to begin to incarnate into the human form, and it was a very, very specific and very scientific way that the DNA templates had to be blended in order to create this option, this evolutionary option of what was called a hybrid race. Well, unfortunately, the hybrid race worked well. The template took well, and it blended well with the angelic human template. But unfortunately, what happened is certain groups of them, motivated by their fallen angelic kin from other places, decided to take over. They had an in on Earth once they got into human-like bodies, and progressively they've raided our human races and mutated our DNA to the point where we don't have anything left of our memory. It's there, but it's turned off. It's like a light switch that's been turned off. So we're dealing with a huge picture here. We won't understand that whole picture if you're just coming into this work right now. There are other things already available. If you're interested in knowing what is that history, we've covered this stuff in other workshops. So I'm not going to, do another workshop on stuff we've already given. But we have the history on the Leviathan races. We have the history on the fall of Atlantis, and how right now this is the culmination of the fall of Atlantis and what's called the Luciferian Covenant. That was an agreement of the Antichristos races and their Leviathan hybrids here to take over this planet when the next stellar activation cycle occurred. That is what's happening now. We are in the middle of a stellar activation cycle that was due between the year 2000 and 2017. It's going on whether we believe in stargates or not. It's happening whether we want to know about it or not. We can either choose to participate in it consciously or participate in it unconsciously. So what we are trying to teach people is an awareness of the big picture, and it's huge. It is a huge picture. It is a picture that begins with evolution in this time matrix 950 billion years ago. We'll learn more about that in the Metatron workshop, because we're going to share some information about the nature of Metatronic science, because Metatron's popping up everywhere these days, just like you used to in the old days of Atlantis. We're going to find out what Metatron really is, what it's connected to. What's going to be fascinating about that is we're going to find out a whole lot about the gods of Olympus when we get into the secrets of Metatron, because there is a huge connection between Metatronic science and what became the gods, the Olympian gods, both of Roman and Greek culture. They were both connected, and both of them came out of Atlantis. They were both mythologies that were based on certain truths that were taking place in Atlantis. And it will be very interesting when we get into the Metatron workshop, because that's when I will get heavily into who's who and, which god was which god and what were they up to. And who were these gods anyway? Were they really gods? And if they were, where'd they go? Like, there's a lot more to the mythologies. The mythologies are a riot because they're a way of taking history and consolidating it in child's fairy tales, almost with a mean sense of humor. Mm-hmm. Because you would take certain things of history, use the names, but turn them into, say, a collective of people into one person, right? And have that person marry this person. But actually you're talking about intermingling of races, as opposed to just one person married that person and this happened. Throughout the whole mythologies, all of the Greek and Roman mythologies, there has been this total historical translation of what was known history in Atlantis. Known history that had to do with Metatron, it had to do with Lemuria, it had to do with all the Earth things, but also other places too. It's going to be very interesting when we take a look at, in the Metatron workshop, we're going to take a look at the names of certain planets that happen to exist in what's called the Wysadek matrix. And it's very interesting. I won't let that cat out of the bag fully now, but when we see that chart, if I have the chart done, it'll be great. If not, we'll just read them down. But it's kind of chuckling. It's a chuckle after when you start to see how the truth that had been taken away was actually put right under our noses through history. We were given part of it in the Bible. Actually, there was a lot more of it in the Bible until the Council of Nicaea got a hold of it and chopped it up into little pieces. The Bible once told a lot. After 325 AD, it told a lot less. There was a few things that happened before that took out some of the guts even before that. You know, by the time the thing was hot off the presses, it was being ripped apart. But these teachings have been here for ages. These are the teachings that Christ originally taught. These are the teachings that people that came before Christ had taught. They are the teachings of freedom, the freedom teachings, the Emerald Covenant freedom teachings. When we're working with scalar grid mechanics, we are working with the same substance that God creates with. This is what we were created with and from. This isn't knowledge that was supposed to be denied us. God created us, yes, God created us as an angelic human race that was appointed as guardians of this particular time matrix. God gave us the knowledge so we could be guardians. The knowledge wasn't meant to be reserved for someone else and denied us here. But we were denied that knowledge ever since Atlantis, when a few people from other places came in and took what didn't belong to them and did things to this planet that culminated in our loss of memory. Now, how does a whole planet lose its memory? That's pretty amazing when you think about it. I mean, I could see if you take, like, a handful of this race or that race and, do something to them genetically and make them, mutated where they can't remember anything. But how do you take out the memory of a whole planet? If you understand scalar science, the science of the shields, the scalar grids, where you understand that the planet has a scalar template and every person on it, every being on it, every tree, every ant, every plant has a scalar template that's connected directly to the planet's template. Now, these templates circulate primal life force currents. They circulate the energy and consciousness of God through the templates. If the bigger template is the Earth template, and then you have all these smaller templates within it that are dependent on the energies that are coming through the planetary template, and you do something to that planetary template, you're going to affect every life form on it. That is how our memory was erased. There were things done here to block the planetary scalar shields, to twist them in ways that were abnormal, that would shut off certain frequencies. Those frequencies carried cognition. They carried higher frequency information. They carried the rest of our identity, where we used to be able to get ourselves back in our bodies. Right now, we feel like we have a higher self somewhere out there in there through there, but who knows where it lives, because it certainly isn't here most of the time. You know, if our DNA was working the right way, we would know ourselves as Christos beings. We would know ourselves as avatars, and we would not have bodies that die. We would not get sick. We would not have any of the problems that are on this planet right now if we had ourselves back together. The reason we don't is because the planetary grids were distorted. There was electromagnetic things done to the planet. The magnetic fields of this planet were altered in abnormal ways that created blockages in the scalar template, which created blockages in the planetary energy flows, which created simultaneous blockages in the DNA templates of every living thing on this planet. So when we're working with the light sound technologies, we're helping to bring the D12 frequency back. The D12 divine blueprint frequency has the ability to reset all of those misaligned frequencies in the planetary grids. We can now bring through this frequency for the first time since 208,216 BC. This planet can run full D12 frequency. That's the first time. That's a long time. That's way before 25,500 when it started to get really messy here. There have been a series of cataclysmic events that took place in our history. And it's because of the culmination of all of those events that we've ended up in the position that we're in right now, where we sit around going, oh, I'm on Earth. How'd I get there? I don't know. You know, who am I? I don't know. I'm here, though. You know? Most of us must start in this place where you don't know who you are. I mean, yeah, I'm an avatar? Yeah, right. Sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Sure, that sounds good. It's like, yeah, right. Somewhere out there, hello. Is there an avatar part of me floating around anywhere? We do have these higher parts of ourselves. They're the parts of ourselves that never lost connection to God. They're the parts of ourselves that do not have to go to a priest to be our intermediary between God, because we have our own direct living connection to God. Now, the people on the planet here that are representing the Christos mission are carrying the same message they carried in the last 5 million years. They've carried it on every planet they've ever been on. They've carried it on Earth even since Atlantis. They were usually persecuted and killed for it after Atlantis fell. They carried the truth of the inner Christos and your own direct connection to Source, and they carried a mission. There was a promise made in very ancient times by certain races that became later incarnated as the human races, a promise to heal this time matrix. There was a thing that happened 250 billion years ago in Earth time that happened this was before humans were even created. It happened between races that were called the Christos founders races. There was a period of time in that 250,000 billion years ago called the Lyran Wars, the Lyran Elohim Wars. Certain groups of Elohim fell from grace. They went through something called code convolution, which means their DNA templates, they have DNA up there too, but it's a little different than ours down here. Their DNA templates became distorted because they created within their own lines the inbred to the point where distortions occurred that weren't intended. And in those distortions of genetics came distortions of consciousness as well. And they started warring. And they started warring with the founders' races this was a free will matrix. This was supposed to be an expression of God that was based upon love and cooperation and free will and coevolution. It was not supposed to be a warring matrix, but it became one because of those things that happened 250 billion years ago. That was the time of the original sin. The original sin was when this whole time matrix was almost imploded and sucked down into a black hole, thanks to what the fallen angelic Elohim had done. Now, we're still fulfilling a promise. The people who incarnate as human beings, angelic humans, they made a promise, way back before the human form even existed, to come in and finish the healing of this time matrix. We're still here. And it wasn't just on Earth. Earth, here, Tara, in density 2, Gaia in density 3. That's where Gaia fits in. Lady Gaia, Mother Earth. On density 3, when we talk about densities, we're talking about 15-dimensional structure again. For those who don't know, dimensions 1, 2, and 3 is density 1. Dimensions 4, 5, and 6 is density 2. Dimensions 7, 8, and 9 is density 3. Dimensions 10, 11, and 12 is density 4, pre-matter. And dimensions 13, 14, and 15 is density 5, antimatter. Not antimatter, but antimatter. That is a gaseous before pre-matter substance. All right, so there's a science behind all that we're doing. I'm throwing a lot at you and a lot of pieces to try to bring them together and weave in for the people who do, there's some people know all of this stuff. Some of you don't know much at all of this stuff, so I'm trying to give you a roundabout, understanding of it. When we do this grid work, we are here on a mission, we are here on a purpose. The purpose we are here to do is to bring back the Christos frequency as much as possible. We are here to assist in healing areas of the planetary grids that have been purposely and intentionally distorted and used and misused. Right now, we're in a very special place. We're in a very special place because this place, long ago, was called Ionia. This whole place was called Ionia. Ionia stretched all the way from up into the areas of France and Italy, all the way down through the island nations through here. The civilization called the Ionian civilization was a massive pre-Atlantean civilization. It existed during Atlantis and before Atlantis. It was a civilization that was created by the root races and the cloister races of the angelic human 12 tribes. Tribe 5, the guardians of Stargate 5, which is located right under the Vatican in Rome, Italy. They were the ones who populated the Ionian nations. They were the guardians of Stargate 5 and all of its territories. They were here on the Christos realignment mission. They were here trying to help heal the planetary shields and bring back the D12 Christos imprint here. The Ionian people were the people that became the original Greek people. The Ionian people became a very mixed peoples because Ionia became a haven. The areas we're in right now and the areas that we'll see on this tour became a place of exile. Now, if we go back to the Atlantean period, before the 9558B flood, there were a few things that took place in history. We'll start with 25,500 BC. It was a period of time when races called the Anunnaki races invaded here, and they put up something called the Nibiruan Dyadic Crystal Grid setup. They anchored it at Stonehenge in England, which is Stargate 11 area. And they began to progressively infiltrate this area, the planet, and put in crystalline technologies that work like microchips. They put in these crystalline technologies to get control of the planetary Templar, which is the planetary grid system. Now, that invasion began in 25,500 BC, but the Guardian races were still strong here, and they were able to squelch some of the outer level of the rebellion. So civilization continued, where you had it polarized, and you had the ones working the Antichristos agenda being directed by two different groups. One, what are called the Anunnaki races, and the other, what are called the Draconian races. In other workshops, we got into exactly who these people are, in which there's a whole bunch of different families in both of them. So I won't go into that again. If you want to know it, it's in, it's in Voyager's book, has a lot of that, and there's other books that have it in too. Now, had the 2226 BC, fall of the last stellar activation cycle, where it stopped halfway through and we had a partial pole shift because it was stopped halfway through. Then we had 10,500 BC, Luciferian conquest, when more of the nasties came in, and they put wormholes here, which we really didn't need any more of, and they're off the coast of Florida, by the way, if anybody wants to know. That's why the Bermuda Triangle does its thing. After that, there was the 9,558 BC flood. The flood in the Bible, the Great Deluge, well, it was orchestrated. It was done on purpose. It was done as part of the Luciferian covenant. It was orchestrated. It had the use of spaceships to help it, because we're not alone in this universe. The fallen angelics tend to drive spaceships, at least the ones in the lower densities do. So all of this stuff, ETs, the whole thing, all of it is part of the same story, and we need to begin to understand this. Part of the same story happens to do with our history as it's come up. Right now, we're sitting on a place. There was a place where the Grail lines, we call them the Grail line humans, which were the original, the real humans, not the Leviathan hybrid humans, not the ones that were trying to take over the planet that didn't belong here, that were only invited here to try to help them, and then they tried to take over the hospital. But the real humans who carried the templates, the DNA templates of genuine humans, go with the planetary grids. They match the mathematical coding in the planetary grids. We were the ones who operated the Templar. Because of that DNA connection to the planetary grids, we had the codes that could open and close the stargates on this planet, and anything that wasn't organic to this planet didn't have those codes, so it couldn't use the gates. That's why, since Atlantis, this race has been progressively infiltrated, and there has been forced interbreeding that has taken place here, as certain of the Leviathan hybrid race strains tried to build a master takeover race that would have more and more of the codings that went with the planetary stargates, so they could, when this time came, have enough of the coding in their bodies to run the Templar the way they wanted it to. Now, we've gotten into, in some of the other workshops, what they're trying to do. It has to do with black holes and phantom matrix and pulling this planet into a black hole system. We have the science stuff on that, so I won't go into it in this workshop. But I want to talk about here, while we're here, a bit of the Ionian history. The Ionian people, which were originally the Greek people and the Roman people. It was before the people that are known as Romans now came. They weren't the first people there. The first people were the 12 tribe, what were they called? Ionitu or something. It's in the book. I have to remember that tribe 5 were the people that were settled here.
Dorians?
No, it wasn't Dorian. I'll look it up, in fact. I have it in the book. No, it's in the book. Where's my bookie? Let me get... Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Is that my bag? Can you hand me that, please? Just the book. Yeah.
Just pull Vita out of it.
Yeah, I just want to find the name of that.
What are you going to break?
What?
You got about 20 minutes left.
Okay.
If we do the site work.
Iona to Attila, I think. Iona to Attila? Yeah. Yeah, okay, I found it in my brain. All right. The originals were called the Iona to Attila. Now, yeah, Attila. And that's where you get the italic races and those kind of things. They were the original peoples here. They were part of a large group of people called the angelic human 12 tribes races. There were 12 tribes with very specific names, each one of them assigned to be the guardians of one of 12 stargates on the planet. All right, they were guardians of Stargate 5. Now, what happened in Atlantis after the 10,500 BC Luciferian conquest, areas of Atlantis progressively got more invaded by the Leviathan races, and the Grail line humans were being killed. They were being executed. They were being hooked up to horrendous technologies to try to literally read their cellular memory to get the knowledge right out of their bodies and that kind of thing. There were horrible things being done to them. In order to preserve the race lines, because they were going to become extinct on the planet, which means the Leviathans would have taken over the planet completely, they broke up and moved away from the areas that they were originally supposed to be in, to be the guardians of the stargates they were assigned to. Now, the people that ended up coming to Ionia were the people that were guardians of several stargates that were in Atlantis. One of them is Stargate 11. Now, in the other workshops we've given, we've talked about where Atlantis was. All right, we've talked about the fact that England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales right now are part of what was northern Atlantis that was called Lohas Atlantis. That's where Stargate 11 is. Down in the area of Bermuda, the Bermuda Islands, where Stargate 3 is, that was an area called Nohasa Atlantis. This was all a continent once upon a time that was in what's in the Atlantic right now. And down in the area of what's called Florida right now is a place that was called Brua Atlantis that had Stargate 2, which was the control gate for the rest of the gates on this planet. It was called the Grual Point, or the Holy Grail, the Holy Grual. That was the place that if you got control of that, you could control the other stargates on the planet from it. When things were getting bad after the Luciferian conquest in 10,500 BC, the races from other areas had run up to Stargate 11. They had crossed over and they were hiding. There was a whole cluster of them. They were up with the Celtics. The Celtics were one of the Grail Line races that were up there. The Druidecs, which originally were from Bermuda area, which was Stargate 3 area, ran up there. So everybody's hiding up in Lohas, and then they invaded Lohas. So everybody ran down, right? It was like, where can you run if they won't get you? All of the races that had begun, it started with Lemuria even before. The ones from Lemuria, when Lemuria sunk because it was invaded and there was a whole bunch of mess that went down, the Grail Lines from Lemuria, which were they were part of Gate 12 guardianship, because what's called Q-Site 12 is over in what's now Kauai. They moved the remnants of the Mua Lemurian races over into Lohas Atlantis. And then when lower Atlantis was getting invaded, the good guys, the Grail Lines, were moved all the way up. So everybody stuck up in the area of England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. Then they started doing stuff with the climate, where we ended up with ice ages and things happening up like there. That happened first. There was one around the 22,000? No, 22,000. Right after the 22,000, 326 BC mess, a bunch of them had to come back down because they had ice. And then it started to thaw again, because you can make the ice caps melt or freeze, depending on what you do with the crystal technologies that are in the grids. There are people that actually control our biosphere right now, and we don't even know it. But anyway, the people, the races, the Grail Line races, that were trying to escape the progressive infiltration and invasion of the Leviathan force, ended up in a little ball up in England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales area. And then they were invaded very fully during the Atlantean period by certain Anunnaki-based groups, and they ran and they spread out. But most of them came down to the next closest relatives, which were the ones that were hanging out and still had a stronghold, as Stargate 5. So they came into Italy and they came into Greece. Well, they came into Italy first in those areas, but progressively the Leviathans moved down and chased them, and it chased them out into the islands. So they ended up, very many of them, holding the grids. They were able to hold the Greek islands for quite a while. They were in Cyprus. They were in Paxos. These little clusters were able to hold together and hold the grids. When we go to see the Minoan ruins, we'll talk a little bit about where they fit into all of this, because those cultures were originally started by the Grail Line races from Atlantis, who were on Exodus from Atlantis. When we get into, okay, where did all these Egyptian, these gods come from, the Olympian gods come from? And why is there a similarity between these Olympian gods and the Egyptian gods? There's a reason for that. We'll talk more about the reason when we get into the Metatronic workshop, but part of the reason has to do with exactly the stuff that was happening in Atlantis. Many people have been taught in this culture to look up to the Olympian gods as if they were good things. Many people have been taught to look up to certain god names, not just in like Olympian gods, but in Egypt. They were taught to worship certain things. They were taught to worship certain things in the Christian doctrines. They were taught to worship certain things that weren't originally in any of the holy doctrines. There's been an infiltration that took place here. If we can understand that when we are dealing with fallen angelic races, and we can understand that some of them are from density levels, matter density levels that are similar to our own, which means they have a physicality to them. It means when they want to travel, they very often use things we would call spaceships. All right? So there's really very little distinction between an ET and an FA, which is a fallen angelic, right? Etfaz, I mean, yeah, they're all the same thing. All right. I just lost my train of thought on that. Oh, God. Anyway. Right now, we're sitting in a place that a very sacred covenant was made. It was a covenant that was made here, and then those who made it ran because they were chased, because somebody took over what was put here, and it wasn't meant to be. The whole Delphi legends came out of something called a technology called the eyes. Now, I talked about the emerald eyes of Ionia. The eye technologies are something we're going to talk about more in the Metatronic workshop. But the eyes are polarization and refraction lenses. These are technologies, crystal technologies, not some mumbo-jumbo psychic stuff. These are crystal technologies that are physically based crystal technologies. If you can picture an eye as a lens, that if light or frequency comes in, it bends it in different ways. It sends it somewhere. Lenses do something. We have glasses that bend light so our eyes can see better. There are lenses that can do all sorts of things. Lasers use lenses, all this kind of things. Well, these eyes that we talk about are a series of lenses that were placed on this planet. The first set of lenses were not placed here by guardian races. The second set of lenses were placed here by guardian races to counteract the effects of the first ones in case they activated. The placement of these things called the eyes began in 22,326 BC, when the stellar activation cycle then crashed because it was stopped. So the fallen angelics didn't pull this whole planet into a black hole during that mess, the war that was taking place in that time. The first set of eyes, you can call them the eyes of Metatron for now, and we'll get into their specific names, were set up in the planetary grids, and they were part of a technology called the Beast. Now, the Beast is an interesting kind of... it's been referred to as the Beast in the Bible, but it's also Beast meaning blank slate technology. Okay, blank slate technology, and you put a few little words in there, you get beast out of it. But the BST, the blank slate technology, was meant to literally rip this planetary system, and not just this system, 11 dimensions of our 15-dimensional time matrix. It's like taking the core out of an egg, the yolk out of an egg. They were intending to literally rip 11 dimensions of our time matrix, including Earth, down into what is called the Wysadek matrix black hole system. A black hole system is an imploding system that has to feed on other energy sources, or it will implode upon itself because it's no longer connected to its natural life force currents that flow from the Christos level and beyond. All right, we are in the middle of a situation where we're sitting on a bunch of lenses. It's like sitting on a bunch of time bombs that were put in here in Atlantis. Now, the guardian races for a very long time here, and throughout our work in the last several years, have been trying very hard to not have what's happening right now take place. The work we have been doing with round tables and the work we have been doing with running Christos frequency has been about trying to get the planetary grids to hold enough D12 frequency that the lenses, the fallen angelic lenses, eyes, couldn't activate. Because we were doing so well, and we had got the planetary grids to such a high frequency level, the fallen angelics weren't planning to do their big nasty until 2011, right before the 2012 supposed opening of the Halls of Mente Stargates. They were going to activate the Beast in 2011. That was their plan. Their plan wasn't going to make it because we had so much D12 frequency running in the grids, they just weren't going to make it. So they activated it on March 23rd. Once the Beast activates, it can't be deactivated. Now, if you look at the Beast as a set of lenses that were placed in this planet to make a mess of the planetary grids and to cause a real problem here, there was also the set of emerald eyes that were put in the same locations that the others were put in order to counteract what the negative ones would do. Now, the guardian races have been trying to prevent activation of either set of them, because just that, it's almost like a frequency fight in the planetary grids between these two lens systems. One is trying to literally reverse the whole frequency on the planet and take it down into a black hole spin, and the other is trying to hold it back up and split out the unnatural frequencies that are allowing that to happen. So it will create a stress on the planetary grids that was something the Guardians have been trying to avoid very much. there's going to be a stress on the planetary grids at this point. Now, the emerald eyes work in a way that if the Metatronic eyes activate, the other ones will instantaneously kick in, the emeralds will instantaneously kick in activation with them. And then the fight begins. The frequency fight begins in the grids. It's not about people. It's about frequencies in the planetary grids. If there were no indigo races, indigo children races, or angelic human races left on the planet, the emerald eyes would work one way. But if there were still people left on the planet, still angelic humans left on the planet, and we ran the codes, they would work a different way. If there was nobody left on the planet, it wouldn't matter if the planet went into pole shift, clearing this stuff. So they would just blast it through, and that would be that, and the place would spin, and then they'd rebalance it. Now, because there's people here, and there's still angelic humans here, what we do can make a big difference in how the emerald lenses behave. The emerald lenses can't be shut off either. They were tied into the technology of the Metatronic lenses. But what we can do by working with the codes, this is why they're giving us the codes, the Ayaheya and the others we're going to be given, that have to do with the God world mathematical programs. They will be able to run enough frequency that we can counterbalance. And it's almost like slowing down what the emerald eyes will do and stretching it out so it balances in the grids rather than just whips through and clears stuff. Because if it whips through and clears stuff, we'll have a Christos realignment mission really fast. But there's not going to be anybody left on the planet to appreciate it. So the work we're doing now, because we're going into Plan B, we've switched the focus into certain other types. We're still doing roundtables, but more selectively. It's not how many we can get done right now that's most important. It's working with different techniques that they're teaching us now that are working with these higher Veka codes and what are called the Eka codes that we're going to learn about in the workshops as we go along this time. So I just wanted to let you know that here we are on a site where there is an emerald eye that's awakening, because very near it there is a Metatronic eye that's awakening. There is actually a reason that this place was chosen. This has a particular orientation to Gate 5, Stargate 5, that's in Rome. This area has a particular grid orientation to that Stargate. There was a thing put here once upon a time by the Guardian races in Atlantis. This is where this place here, as part of Ionia, was called Ashayana. All right, that was the name of the province of Ionia that these lands encompass. Ashayana was very large and went down through Cyprus and all the way up around this area. Ionia was a very, very large area. It wasn't just like, little small. It wasn't small like Greece or small like Italy. Now, they were all part of it. This area, Ashayana, had a certain crystalline structure. Now, this wasn't one of the refraction lenses. It wasn't one of the eyes. It was actually a trust that was given to the Guardian races where they could communicate directly with the people of Density 2, Terra, and they could communicate directly with the people of Inner Earth. All right, now, this is where we get the legends of Delphi. The original oracle of Delphi is a crystal implant that's in the grids. It's actually a set of about 400 of them that are all interconnected, and they're in the grids through this whole area, and they're centered actually in this area. These allowed people to interact with the other races, the Guardian races that were in Inner Earth and that were in Terra. It connects through into Terra through Stargate 5, because remember, Density 2 is dimensions 4, 5, and 6. So Terra, that's the Density 2 counterpart of Earth, all right, connects through Stargate 5. So if this site connects to Stargate 5 in Rome, this would be a place where you could put a relay station in to Terra. Well, it worked really well for a while, and there was a promise made. There was a promise made, the Covenant of Ashayana, that the groups here, the Ionian groups, would assist. First of all, they would have, if it went into crisis intervention, where the emerald eyes began to awaken, that they would make sure this site was, let's say, cleared in a way that it didn't amplify the negative Metatronic coding. Because what had happened very soon after the crystal implants that were put in to allow the communication station to Terra to be put in, this area was taken over. The Ionians were invaded. They were invaded by Draconian races, which were Leviathan races that came from Rome, and like pre-Rome, before we know of Roman history. This was happening before this stuff. There's a very, very strong Draconian invasion that took place here before the Anunnaki came in with their particular gods and goddesses. the Draconian forces took over this particular site, they would use the people here, the Leviathan races, that they just think they're human. They don't know what their gene code is. They don't know there's fallen angelics that are moving them and hanging out in their auric fields and moving them to do things. You know, they worship gods. They don't even know who they are. Well, that's what was happening here. And there's a very strong Draconian coding that was overlaid into this area and then into the crystals in this area. And then after that, the Anunnaki races came in, motivated their Leviathans to come in and take over the Draconians, and they added their own overlays into the interface station. So what we have here is what used to be a dormant telecommunication station to density 2, D5, that once upon a time linked to Tara, and right now it links to Tiamat, which is an Anunnaki-controlled planet in Phantom Matrix. If this stays this way, because this site has the ability to amplify. It was originally, it was supposed to be able to amplify the balancing effects of the emerald eyes. Because it's now metatronically coded into the other grids, it will amplify the effect of the metatronic eyes. And they're activating it now for that purpose. Now, some of the gods, this is why be very careful when you go to any of the temples and things here. And I would very honestly suggest, I wouldn't suggest praying to Apollo or anybody else until you find out who they are. Then you can make your choice. You know, all power to you if you want to. But the names of the deities that came up here, they're very ancient names. We'll learn about them in the Metatronic work. You'll find out what the history on these names is. But right now realize every place that there is a temple like this, it was an ET communication station. It was either one of the good guys or one of the not good guys. We have good guys and bad guys. It's like cops and robbers down here, and it has been for a long time. And the only difference really between either is the good guys love them all, and the bad guys don't. The good guys recognize the fact that we're all on the same side, and even if you guys still want to not be our friends and still want to be nasty, we still love you. Which unfortunately the other side does not reflect back to us. So when we go through the tours of the temples and things, if we can keep in mind that their temples were built here for very specific reasons, and it had very little to do with what regular history is going to tell you. These are the hidden records of Atlantis. These places were important because in Atlantis, all the grid stuff was known about. They knew where the gates were, they knew where the interface portals were, they knew how to mess with the planetary grids, and the other guys knew how to fix them. So right now, the Delphi temples, the reason people could go here once upon a time and speak to the Shaleon people could come and speak to the races of Tara. They could speak to the inner earth races. They could get good advice. This is where the oracle legends come from. There was indeed an oracle. There was a great crystal that allowed those powers of higher sight to be given. And after this place was taken over, for a while you had a Draconian oracle. Now Draconians are the dragon moths. Okay? They're the ones from Alnitak, Orion, and they are an ET race of fallen angelics. So when I say draconian, I'm not just using that in the common sense of the word. I'm using it as a very specific race. They're dragon moths, and they're not very pretty, and they're very mean. Okay? Yeah, so much for mutation. We love them, but yeah, we love them all. But for a while, it would be, you would have draconian information being beamed out of this station. When it came to the period of, where Athens was becoming popular and all of these things, and Delphi became a place where, where the Greek culture was becoming focused, the Draconians didn't control it anymore at that point. The Anunnakis controlled it at that point, the Palladian Nibiruan Anunnaki specifically. So right now, if you want very good Palladian Nibiruan advice, go talk to the Oracle of Delphi. And they'll plug you right in to the ET communication network that goes up into Alcyone in the Pleiades that is run by the Palladian Nibiruan Anunnaki. So there's a lot more than what we've had access to. This information is on the CDD plates. This isn't stuff I make up. I mean, I'd be just as happy to, it's fine. If Apollo's God, I'll worship him, Just let me know who's who, But it doesn't quite work that way. Actually, I wouldn't worship. Worship is like grovel, and I won't grovel before anyone because I know we're all faces of God. And even the fallen ones. This is why they're still lovable, because they started as faces of God. They've turned themselves into something else, but they still started there, which means the potential to come back is always there. So anyway, it's probably getting late if we're going to do ceremony, right?
We're going to do.
We're going to do?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What we'd like to do here, we've been asked to do a ceremony. What?
Do it
Here? Yeah.
Right here.
Okay. I just want to...
Yeah, do that now.
Okay, can I just give it a... Okay, now the ceremonies that we've been asked to do, the first one we were going to do yesterday, but we were told that we might as well do it like today on this site instead. There's something weird with the energy up at the Acropolis, because we were supposed to go there, but they said don't bother. They said like we'll arrange the pickup over here. What we were going to do over there yesterday was we had a meeting. There's a bunch of Iyani that are going to come with us, and I say come with us, and it's interesting. We're going to be learning a bit about projecting, about sending a part of ourselves into a second body form. That's the first part of getting your whole body there, is to get half yourself there as an energy imprint. All right. A group of Iyani are going to be with us throughout this whole tour, and we were supposed to do a pickup where, like, okay, guys, this is our meeting site. Hello, we're here. Okay. Where they find us, where they can zero in exactly on our energy, where we are, so they can kind of run a periphery field to make sure nothing tries to mess with us while we're here in these lovely temples of who knows who's talking to who in these temples. So the Iyani were going to be with us. We're going to get, and like many of there's many ancient Ionian souls that have left but stayed in this area in order to serve as guardians for this time, when they knew the ones who didn't belong here would leave, because the Christos realignment would come. So we're kind of like saying hi guys to them in the first part, and then the second part we are simply going to run the Ayahea coding in. This is to begin, that will go directly into the emerald eye. This will begin the balancing phase on the emerald eye. It will also help to clear the Delphi crystal, so it isn't used to amplify the Metatronic crystal. So we're just simply helping at this point the process of the activation of the eyes. The eyes are going to activate whether we do anything or not. But how traumatic that cleaning is going to be, and how calm it's going to be will depend on whether we're willing to help work with the coding. So we're going to drop an Ayahea code here that will help to balance the rhythms out. What it's really saying, what we're saying to the grids is, hello, there's still people in Iyani here. You don't want to do the full blast right now. Right? Stabilize, but don't blast it. Right? All right. Because really these were set up as a last-ditch resort. If this planet was going to be taken down into a black hole and there was no life left on it, it didn't matter how many times it rolled as long as it didn't go down. All right? So right now there's still life here. We don't want it to roll because that's going to be a mess. So what we're doing is helping to balance the grids right now. And there'll be more. We'll learn more about it in the Metatronic workshop. Now I got to be quiet, and I'll turn this over to Az so he can take us through the ceremonies before it's too late. We have to go. Ooh, and I got to move my bottom. It's stuck to the spot. Ooh. Oy. Ow.
We're a little bit pressed for time on this. We're going to do the Akasha induction, and you'll need also to refer to the Ahaya code, all right? So just if you can bend your pages over so you don't go rustling around for them later on. I mean, any way, the Akasha and the Ahaya. If you haven't got any cards of the Akasha, you have to use the black and white ones in the new books.
I don't have the colored one.
We are, yeah. I mean, if we get away on time, which we will do, we can do it. Okay, we're actually going to do the two activations back to back. It's fine to do that. And I'll just tell you what we're going to do first so that you have some awareness of the sequence of events, which will take us about 10 minutes, and then we'll hightail it down to the coach so we can keep up with our schedule. All right. We'll open it with the declaration of the Maharata, which is something that we've never used before. We've had it, but we haven't used it before, and we're going to use it today for the first time. Then we will do the Akasha Shield induction, okay? Then we'll do the Song of Lyra, once through. We'll follow that with the Song of the High Vekas, okay? We'll move into the declaration of Christianic intent, which we usually use before we do a round table. Then we'll do the Ahaya code activation. And then we'll do the Song of Lyra to close. All right? So is everybody comfortable and ready? Yep. All right, so the first is the declarations to repeat after me, line by line. Okay, we all do it. Pardon me? What, the declaration of...
They're not.
You don't have them.
Oh, okay.
You just repeat them after me.
Okay.
All right. So everyone's ready? regents and beloved Iani. In the name of Melchizedek, Cloister, Emerald Order, Iani, Holy Order of the Unisai, Sacred House of One, we say, I decree now in this moment of knowing,
I decree now in this moment of knowing,
that all things here within me are henceforth restored to the original divine intention of the one self that is mine. I release now all bonds of manifest illusion that place veils of self-forgetting before mine eyes. I revoke all separations of duality through which my heart is rendered numb with disillusion and discord. In this moment I reclaim the whole of my condition, reaching forth into the depths of all creation, to now call my spirit home. I am the sun of radiant glowing. I am the sun of radiant glowing. I am the heart of divine love. I am the heart of divine love. I am the still point of the face of all creation. I am the still point of the face of all creation. I am the voice of the universal song. I am the voice of the universal song. I decree now in full remembered knowing. I decree now in full remembered knowing that I am all and we are one. That I am all and we are one. In setting forth this decree of my eternal divine power, I shall render divine intention only. Through which the all and I are equally served. In the highest order of our collective best divine intention. I call now unto the many selves and shadows. Ensconced within the illusions of time. And decree unto thee. That I am this I am. I am the wind that brushes thy faces. I am the rain that renews thy field. I am the whisper of the breath of God within you. We now are the expression of divine heart, mind, and hand. We are the rumbling hymn song of the earth and worlds of matter. We are the prana breath of God eternal manifest. We are the waters of eternal life forever outward flowing. We are the cooling life force flame of the cosmic fire expressed. In our union now and always. Declare we in our wholeness. That all dissidence is rendered spent. All conflict now made healed. Now you're going to use your own names in a second. As divine this, as a Tanya too, as we, the Maharata Kumbhai do now decree through the divine love, wisdom and power that is mine to express now as this moment the condition of Mahabhaivektai and Aureya Namur Upon this invocation, divine intention is rendered manifest.
Upon this invocation, divine intention is rendered manifest.
In all conditions to which I now assign.
In all conditions to which I now assign.
Ta in Asia intadoe.
Ta 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 Asia intadoe.
Now the Akasha Shield induction. You just get your Akasha images ready if you don't have the color cards. Okay. Alright, just stare at the image of the Akasha code for a few seconds. Consciously draw some Maharic frequency from the earth core while you're doing that. And then gently begin to cross your eyes as you're looking at focusing on the Akasha image until it doubles for you. Hold your eyes in this crossed focus for a moment. Take 3 rapid breaths. On each exhale, project a stream of indigo current from your third eye. Now inhale several breaths of pale silver D12 Maharata current up from the earth core, up through your Maharic cord. On each exhale, deposit the Maharata current in the pineal gland at the center of the brain to form a pale silver Maharata ball in the pineal. Several breaths, draw the frequency up from the earth core, all the way up to the pineal, and start to build and expand a ball of Maharic frequency there. Just breathe easily now and return your focus to the ruche at the center of the Akasha symbol. Draw frequency once more from the earth core and project the breath on a stream of indigo current from the third eye into the ruche symbol. Now inhale while drawing the indigo current stream with the ruche image attached to it back through the third eye into the Maharata ball in the pineal. Inhale one more breath of Maharata current up from earth core to the Maharata ball at the pineal. Then use a forceful exhale to push the Akasha ruche encoded Maharata ball out to the right to the metta position. Visualize the ball growing to the size of a basketball over the right shoulder. And visualize the image of the ruche as expanding to fill the inside of the Maharata ball. Now forcefully inhale, drawing the Maharata ball back to the position centered around your head. Then use 3 breaths to inhale Maharata current up from the earth's core to the pineal and exhale the Maharata current outwards to fill and expand the Maharata ball. Visualize the ball expanding outward from around your head until the Maharata ball fully encompasses your body and the entire chakra system. Breathe into it until it expands above and below, expanding out to the 14th chakra, 36 inches above your head, expanding out into the earth core, continues expanding. Breathe into it, expanding it as you go. It begins to form a huge 3-dimensional Akasha teardrop. Maharata Kumbai Vectus. Maharata Kumbai Vectus Azatanya tu in Ebukai on Iblion by Vectai. Maha by Vectai honore on amor. Iste onta iste trajda era. Patate ashelum sa Asia interdoe. Shaddai Urea Kuntan Akuntan. Shaddai Urea Kuntan Akuntan. Shaddai Urea Kuntan. 3 rounds of the Song of the High Vekas. Maharata Mueva Kira Shesha Kushara Reja Raika Ome Atre Ina E Maharata Mueva Kira Shesha Kusha Deja Dadru Eja Raika Oma Etre Ina E Maharata Mueva Kira Sheesha Kusha Deja Raju Asia Raeka Oma Etre Ina E. Twice more. Oma Etre Ina E. Oma Etre Ina E. Okay, back to repeat after me. Blessed be in the name of the one true God.
Blessed be in the name of the one true God.
And the ever Holy Spirit that joins us all.
And the ever Holy Spirit that joins us all.
In this gathering today as the universal children of God.
In this gathering today as the universal children of God.
Together assembled in their divine Christed stand.
Together assembled in their divine Christed stand.
Blessed be the hearts, minds, bodies and spirits of all gathered here.
Blessed be the hearts, minds, bodies and spirits of all gathered here.
As with pure and impeccable intention.
As with pure and impeccable intention.
We set forth with full decree.
We set forth with full decree.
To the loving one true source of all creation.
To the loving one true source of all creation.
Let my will be thy will.
Let my will be thy will.
Let my action be thy action.
Let my action be thy action.
Let my love be thy love.
Let my love be thy love.
And let my power be thy power.
And let my power be thy power.
And may we now gathered.
And may we now gathered.
Serve as the vessels for thy good works.
Serve as the vessels for thy good works.
And everlasting intention.
And everlasting intention.
On this day we present call into action.
On this day we present call into action.
The love, truth, power and glory of our eternal Christ within.
The love, truth, power and glory of our eternal Christ within.
On this day we, in our Christ power and love.
On this day we, in our Christ power and love.
Set forth to reclaim and again sanctify.
Set forth to reclaim and again sanctify.
The ever-holy, divine Christic, divine blueprint.
The ever-holy, divine Christic, divine blueprint.
Of this sacred land called earth.
Of this sacred land called earth.
In the name of all that is holy.
In the name of all that is holy.
Just and true.
Just and true.
On behalf of the original intentions of the one true God.
On behalf of the original intentions of the one true God.
And all beings in all worlds.
And all beings in all worlds.
Who have long suffered to protect God's will intact.
Who have long suffered to protect God's will intact.
In our Christ presence now.
In our Christ presence now.
And upon decree and application of the power.
And upon decree and application of the power.
And love of our eternal Christ fire within.
And love of our eternal Christ fire within.
We go forth now to victory.
We go forth now to victory.
In the long-awaited fulfillment of the divine healing.
In the long-awaited fulfillment of divine healing.
And resurrection.
And resurrection.
Of this earth to its holy Christ's status.
of this earth to its holy Christed status.
May we present humbly open our hearts
May we present humbly open our hearts
in only the Christed way,
in only the Christed way,
to be touched now by the truth of divine joy,
to be touched now by the truth of divine joy,
freedom and love,
freedom and love,
as our long-burdened Earth Mother
as our long-burdened Earth Mother,
and all beings who have passed through her womb
and all beings who have passed through her womb,
are now returned to the Christ fold of eternal light,
are now returned to the Christ fold of eternal light,
sound and divine right order.
sound and divine right order.
May we once again welcome our beloved Earth
May we once again welcome our beloved Earth
into God's house of many mansions,
into God's house of many mansions,
as an officially recognized member
as an officially recognized member
of the Universal Association of Free Worlds.
of the Universal Association of Free Worlds.
On this day we celebrate the victory
On this day we celebrate the victory
of Earth's triumph over the forces of darkness and chaos.
of Earth's triumph over the forces of darkness and chaos.
Today we humbly assist the many guardian races of the God worlds
Today we humbly assist the many guardian races of the God world
in ushering Earth and her peoples into a new and lasting cycle
in ushering Earth and her peoples into a new and lasting cycle
of Christed love and divine right enlightenment.
of Christed love and divine right enlightenment.
May we, as we go forth now in victory,
May we, as we go forth now in victory,
offer an intention of healing,
offer an intention of healing,
love, freedom and remembrance
love, freedom, and remembrance
to all races and beings of all universes,
to all races and beings of all universes,
and a special prayer of unconditional Christic love
and a special prayer of unconditional Christic love
and forgiveness
and forgiveness
to the fallen beings still ruled by the merciless forces of chaos.
to the fallen beings still ruled by the merciless forces of chaos.
May all be healed in loving Christic victory.
May all be healed in loving Christic victory.
By the loving power of my own Christos, it is decreed.
By the loving power of my own Christos, it is decreed.
Ta Asia inter doe.
Ta Asia inter dore.
Ta Asia inter doe.
Ta Asia inter dore.
Ta Asia inter doe.
Ta Asia inter dore.
Okay, the Ohio code activation and the repetition of the magic words.
Oh boy. That one.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, once I get going, I'm
Yeah, cool. All right. Now we'll begin by using Psalm 1. We'll repeat Psalm 1 3 times as if we're using it for salutation. And then we'll pick up and we'll go through Psalm 1, 2, 3, 4 a dozen times. And then we'll finish with Ashalom Ta Akasha Da 3 times.
This is the one we're supposed to look at, this one while we do
Yes.
it, right? So the people who aren't familiar with this yet, should they take out the other page that has the words and sort it right next to it so to help them out?
If they can, yes.
Okay. If you can find in there the page
Actually,
it's about
they can just stare at it for a minute or two, like, you know, just kind of absorb the image and just pull it in, like mentally pull
Just
it
breathe.
in.
Just breathe it in.
Breathe it into your head,
Yeah.
yeah. And then just go to the words.
Okay.
Yeah, just take a couple of breaths.
Yeah. That'll work.
It's going to be simpler for people that way. All right.
Somebody wants
Yeah,
a
there's
copy.
enough frequency in the whole group that makes it
Yeah.
clear for everybody.
Somebody wants a copy because I'm looking. I think everybody has a copy. Yeah, you can find them.
Okay, ready? Okay, Psalm 1 3 times, and then we'll come back to Psalm 1 as the beginning of the 12. Okay. Umae tue ina ikasha. Umae tue ina ikasha. Umae tue ina ikasha. Uma e tue ina kasha. Ire sharadike she tamira pranachi. Manu e creda kuki mayana treari. Maneka ihahura, haramaya maneki. Oma etre ina ekasha. Ire shara dikeshe ta'amira pranachi. Manu ekre dakuki. Mayana treari. Maneka ihahura. Haramaya maneki. Oma etre ina ekasha. Ire sharadikeshe tamira pranachi. Manu ekre dakuki. Mahayana treari. Maneka ihahura. Haramaya maneki. Oma etre ina ekasha. Ire sharadikeshe tamira pranachi. Manu ekre dakuki. Mahayana treari. Maneka ihahura. Haramaya maneki. Oma etre ina ekasha. Ire sharadikeshe tamira pranachi. Manu ekre dakuki. Mahayana treari. Maneka ihahura. Haramaya maneki. Oma etre ina ekasha. Ire sharadikeshe tamira pranachi. Manu ekre dakuki. Mahayana treari. Maneka ihahura. Haramaya maneki. Oma etre ina ekasha. Ire sharadikeshe taramira pranachi. Manu ekre dakuki. Hanukara jayaki. Maneka ihahura. Haramaya maneki. Oma etre ina ekasha. Ire sharadikeshe tamira pranachi. Manu ekre dakuki. Mahayana treari. Maneka ihahura. Haramaya maneki. Oma etre ina ekasha. Ire sharadikeshe tamira pranachi. Manu ekre dakuki. Mahayana treari. Maneka ihahura. Haramaya maneki. Oma etre ina ekasha. Ire sharadikeshe tamira pranachi. Maneka dakuki. Mahayana treari. Maneka ihahura. Haramaya maneki. Oma etre ina ekasha. Ire sharadikeshe tamira pranachi. Manu ekre dakuki. Mahayana treari. Maneka ihahura. Haramaya maneki. Maneka ina ekasha. This is the last one. Ire sharadikeshe tamira pranachi. Manu ekre dakuki. Maneki utility. Maneka
We're done.
Ashalom ta, akashada. Ashalom ta, akashada. Ashalom ta, akashada.
Victory!
Take permission when there are no people here. Yes. But now you cannot.
Like casual sit, hang out, round table type talks for the majority of the smaller workshops. The main part of the workshops for the trip will be the 2 days, the one on the Secrets of Metatron and the one before that on the dance floor programs. So they'll be the intensive ones. So it's kind of like almost like fireside chats, except there's no fire. You know? One of these days, hopefully, we'll have a little place in England that can be like a retreat center, so anybody that wants to come visit us can come and sit by the fire and have fireside chats. That's one of the things we're hoping to envision for the future. But for now, for this evening, what's kind of interesting about the trips when we get guided to go to a certain place, there's always a history that comes out with it, with the trips. It's history that we haven't been given the records for many times until we get to the sites, and then the records start to be given to us. Now, it's interesting, whenever I go anywhere, I'm never alone. And anybody that takes the contact course, after a while you'll get used to what that means. That means that when you have an open communication line with the Guardian Alliance, somebody's always around. So if you have, they'll go away and leave you alone. They don't bother you. But if you're in a place and it's like you're starting to get pieces of the history, there will be a moderator there saying, yes, and this was at this date, and this is what happened here, and you kind of get like a running history book, at the place. So that's what's happening here with this trip. The information, I've been told that by the end of this year, we have a book that we're working on called the Forbidden Testaments of Revelation, and it's a very intensive history book. It's the history that some of the history has already come out in the Voyagers book series and in the Templar course book and things like that. But it's going to be more of a book that concentrates the history, where you see the whole history line. And when I talk about history, I'm really talking about the history from a very, very long time ago that moves up through the present. We've covered a lot of things for people who haven't been to workshops before. We have covered from the beginning times when life was seeded into this time matrix, not just on this planet, but into this 15-dimensional system, which began 950 billion years ago. That's a long time in Earth time calculation, and how that has led through a series of population of planetary systems as we know them from Earth, what we would call planetary systems or star systems, and how that culminated in the seeding of Earth. Now, our history has been riddled with what we would consider to be war. There has been warring taking place in this time matrix for 250 billion years, which really isn't too bad if you look at the fact that from 950 billion years to 250 billion years, everybody got along well. So that was a pretty nice long stretch of peace. But it hasn't been peaceful here for a very long time. The people on Earth are in a very interesting place of consciousness, because when you come into Earth and you incarnate onto this planet, you're incarnating into, let's say, a little bubble. It's a quarantined reality field, and it's been quarantined for over 25,000 years. So people that are born on this planet come in with an innocence that is useful to some degree, but it is also an innocence that can be the downfall of this civilization. Because if a peoples don't know who they are and don't remember who they are, they don't remember where they came from or what larger drama their existence is a part of, it makes them very vulnerable for somebody to come in and fill in the blanks for them and tell them, oh, well, you're this, we created you, so now you follow us. In our recent history, say from Atlantis, 25,500 BC, up to the present, we have been like children on this planet. The races that were the guardians of this planet, that held huge history banks. I mean, this is when we were 12 feet tall and were breatharians. We didn't even need to eat because we had full control. This was what a human was. It was a being who had full control of its ability to manifest and demanifest. We did not need to eat foods. We did not need to, we had different organ systems in our bodies because of the advancement of our gene code. And we were innocent, but all-knowing. There is a place of being where you can be in innocence, but not unaware innocence. We are in aware innocence. Since 25,500 BC, and really it began before that, but the big axe fell during that period of time, and since then, we have been progressively becoming more lost within our hologram down here. We don't remember anymore that we're angels. We don't remember anymore that stargates even exist, forget how to go through them. The fact that we don't have what we used to have is not an act of God. It's not an act of something that was supposed to be in the original divine blueprint for this planet or for this time matrix. But it was an act of, let's say, the interplay of stellar races that was allowed to occur, but only for a certain period of time. It was allowed to occur, and it's interesting. If we go through the history, we'll find, gosh, we've been victimized. That'll be one of the first things that pops out. how could God let anybody do this to us? This wasn't nice. This was like worse than not nice. This was awful. What has happened here has been awful in that context. But we, as humans, incarnating into this reality field, we chose this. We allowed this to take place for certain lessons that we wanted to learn. We were sent on, let's say, a kind of like cosmic doctor's mission. There were races that had fallen, races that were even more ancient than the human race. The human race was created as a doctor race, in a way, that we were going to come in and figure out how to fix it. The best way to find out is to find out what was really causing the problem. So we allowed ourselves to come into a situation where we would experience some of the same genetic mutations and loss of conscious awareness and twists of conscious awareness that those mutations created. So we allowed what has taken place. When we look back at the recent history has been one of the most brutal legs of development on Earth. But that's only in this seeding. There's been 3 seedings of human beings on this planet. Some of you know this that have been to other workshops. Some of you don't yet know this. But 2 of the first 2 seedings were literally wiped out. They were wiped out by the same forces that are back. They're here again, just like we are. Constantly, this place has been under siege because it is a significant location within what's called the Universal Templar System. The Templar System refers to the organic Stargate system. The Stargate system is also the Ascension system, or the Descension system, whichever way you're coming, down or up. All right. The Stargate system is the system of, you could call them portals, stargates. They're frequency modulation zones between the highest frequency spaces before matter has any density, all the way down to the systems that have full dense matter. The Stargate system is what allows any of us to come into the densification of the hologram that we experience as 3-dimensional reality. So the Stargate system, every reality field has a Stargate system, be it in this time matrix or in this cosmic cluster or in others. The Universal Templar is a small part, and we'll learn this in the Dance for Love program, where you start to see how our huge Templar is very small compared to the larger Templar that it's a part of when we get into the God World Templars. But our 15-dimensional system has 12 primary stargates that control the matter systems. They go from pre-matter density at D12 all the way down to where we are here in dimensions 1, 2, and 3. And then there are higher systems of gates that have to do with the God worlds. But ever since the Lyran Elohim Wars of 250 billion years ago, there has been a problem in this time matrix. There have been created a system of stargates that didn't belong here in the first place. They were created because of an event that took place where a certain group of Elohai Elohim became convoluted in consciousness because they had inbred themselves to the point where they had genetic distortion and they were not genetically what they had once been. Because if you cross something with itself enough times, you begin to get errant deviations of the pattern that you didn't expect, and you never know what's going to come out. And that's what happened with some of these Elohim beings. Because of their mutation of consciousness, they decided that they wanted to be masters of this universe. They decided they didn't want it to be a free will universe. They decided that they had the right to do that. And if anybody wouldn't cooperate with them, well, they will just get rid of anybody who wouldn't cooperate with them. So they started warring in the Lyran system. They call it the Cradle of Lyra. That's where our stargates 12, 11, and 10 exist. They're the entry points into any of the lower density systems in this time matrix. When these wars occurred, the Elohai Elohim High Council, which were the ones in charge of Stargate 12, they were the High Council that was they were the closest ones to the Yanas, which are the Ascended Masters that are beyond being in the time matrix. They were commissioned as kind of the supervisory team to make sure everything went well in this particular time matrix, and they worked together with 2 other groups. You had the Elohai Elohim, the Seraphai Seraphim, and the Brahmarama races, and they had all agreed to something called the Emerald Covenant. The Emerald Covenant was a coevolution agreement that they would all agree to work a free will system here where we could explore the hologram and manifesting and creating in density. These were creator gods, parts of we were originally them. We got down here, but we were originally them. The Elohai Elohim, confronted with the problem of portions of their own race that had fallen to the point where they were beginning to war with the other races, they had also were watching this occur with the Seraphai Seraphim races. The Seraphai Seraphim races
created avian life forms. They created reptilian and insectoid life forms. And some of theirs were also having the same problem, and they were fighting with the fallen Elohai Elohim. So there was a lot of conflict going on, and negotiations were tried to help these races re-evolve their genetic code so they could get their consciousness back, so they could stop fighting with each other. But the Elohai Elohim decided to take they were called the Anu Elohim, that was one particular family of them, decided to take matters into their own hands. And if the Elohai High Council wasn't going to help them, then they would simply get rid of the Elohai High Council, and then they would go and get rid of the draconian races that they didn't want here either, and they'd play Masters of the Universe, and this would be their time matrix. And they attempted and succeeded in destroying Stargate 12. Now, Stargate 12 is in a planet called, or a star from here, called Aramatena Lyra. When you look up in the Lyran system here, it's what they call the double-double in Lyra. So that's like, on the star charts, they would call that the double-double. That was the area of Stargate 12. It was in that planetary system. When Stargate 12 was destroyed, there was a big problem for this time matrix because the 12th dimensional frequencies hold what's called the divine blueprint. That's the full mathematical program for everything that's to be manifest in this system is held in scalar wave form within the 12th dimensional frequencies. When Stargate 12 was destroyed, it was fragmented. Those scalar wave forms were fragmented and ripped apart, and part of them went into what's called reversal, which means if you have, let's say, a mathematical program that runs number 1 through 20, take that and flip it around, and you have 20 running through 1. All right, it's a lot more complicated than that, but it's the same concept of a reversal. The mathematical program was running reverse on part of this system. This creates what's called a black hole. As far as science goes, in our contemporary times and sci-fi and that kind of stuff, you can, they talk about black holes. Science here doesn't know a lot about black holes or what they do. But black hole systems are literally systems that, if you think of a pair of nylon stockings, and you know how they get a hole in them, and then it starts to get runners all over the place, and then the hole eats the rest of them eventually, so you throw them away. Well, you can't throw time matrices away. But black holes work like that once a hole is poked in the natural fabric of the scalar wave form, the energy that has gone into that fragmentation begins to reassemble itself in chaotic fragmented form. So let's say you had an alphabet of what we call fire letters or scalar wave forms that created a very beautiful ordered type of universe where things worked well. And you rip those apart and you get alphabet soup, and you throw half of the alphabet soup over this way and half over this way. The one that got thrown over this way became the black hole system, and it reordered itself on an unnatural mathematical program. That unnatural mathematical program did, however, allow for the system to continue, which means the life forms that got taken down into that particular matrix, and it was called the phantom matrix, they were able to, as consciousness, sustain and put themselves back together to a degree. And they formed creator gods in the phantom matrix. And those creator gods were the same ones who tried to blow up the stargates in the first place. They didn't get the whole time matrix, but they got part of it. And they created phantom matrix. And their main objective was to get the rest of the energy off of the main matrix because they were not self-sustaining. When a black hole system is created, the only thing it can do to sustain itself is to draw energy from the matrix it fell from. If that door is closed in the matrix it fell from, it becomes a finite system that implodes in on itself. And when it implodes, we can never be away from God, but there's two ways to go home. One is fully aware and knowing it. The other is as space dust. You're still holy when you're space dust. You just don't remember it, and it doesn't have much meaning to you at the time. So the system called the phantom matrix, which is the beginning of the plight of war in this time matrix, is a system that is structured. They have matter like we do now, because since the Lyran Wars, since the black hole was created, they have progressively found ways to artificially order the energy that they could suck into their system. They have pulled planets into their system. They have pulled galaxies into their system from this time matrix. We're in the middle of a very long drama. We're in the middle of the end of a very long drama. Because for many, many billions of years, there's been a rescue mission going on here trying to get races to evolve back out of the phantom matrix, back out of the black hole system, so they can get their Christic imprint back. The Christic imprint belongs to everybody, not just Christians. In fact, the people that call themselves Christians in this day and age that are more interested in telling you that you have to listen to the Bible the way it's written by the Council of Nicaea more than they're interested in finding out what Christianity is really about. The Christic imprint is your divine blueprint scalar wave pattern. We all come in with one, at least we originally did. Now the people in the black hole system, the races that have evolved from there, they no longer have that. They have created races upon races from their system that were born without what's called a Christic spark. That means they don't have the original ordered mathematics as the basis for their template. So they've created many, many distorted forms, many, let's say, mutated children. The children of the phantom matrix became very much intertwined with the children of our matrix. And Earth became one of the main places where that took place. The intertwining of the phantom races and the natural angelic races on this side of the barrier, let's say, began way before we came to Earth. It began in the Gaian system. Now, when I talk about Gaia, I'm talking about density 3, dimensions 7, 8, and 9. It's an etheric matter density level, where we have physical matter here. Then density 2 is a stage between this level of physicality and etheric, where if you imagine what you think a ghost might look like, that kind of, you can poke your finger through it kind of matter, but it's still there, except it doesn't look that way when you're there. It looks just as physical when you're there. It just looks etheric from here. All right. Anyway, it began with Gaia. And it's funny because if you look at the Greek mythologies, Lady Gaia was a goddess. It was a goddess of the earth and things. Yeah, that was definitely true. They didn't tell you about density levels, and they took all the science away from it. But they personified Gaia and the names of a lot of things into the Greek mythologies and the Roman mythologies. But the problems began that are affecting Earth began in the Gaian system, and that began about 570 million years ago, where there was a whole bunch of wars, and it was always, you had the angelic races that were trying to assist the fallen races to get out of the black hole system before the black hole system was closed permanently, because once it was closed, you couldn't get them back out again. So it was an act of love to keep the system opened, to allow it to have enough energy by taking energy from the system so it could sustain long enough to try to evolve these people back into their original forms. But the warring it got progressively more intense from the time of 570 million years ago, because this is when the original guardian races that were here were called the Azarites. They were a collective race that was created by putting the genetic templates of the Elohai Elohim, the Seraphai Seraphim, and the Brahmarama races all together into one to create a race that was appointed as the guardians of the Templar of this time matrix. They were the original angelic race that was supposed to go in here and help the others evolve back out and make sure they didn't destroy a whole bunch of things in the process. Well, the Azarites became entangled in one of the major wars in the Gaian system. They were called the Gaian-Orion Wars, and it had to do with some of the draconian races in the fallen matrix that are associated with the Orion system, and it had to do with a number of other races. We'll get into more of that history when we talk about the Metatronic thing, because this is when Metatron became a problem for our time matrix. But in the meantime, this period, 570 million years ago, was a turning point in this time matrix. The Azarites encountered some problems where large numbers of them ended up in the phantom matrix trying to get the others out. So a new race had to be created to serve as the guardian race on this side, and that's where humans were created. We were originally called the Oraphim angelic human, and from the Oraphim came another type of human. It was a step down in the gene code. The Oraphim had anywhere from 24 to 48 DNA strand templates. When you step them down, they're called the indigo children this time around, for anyone who hasn't followed the work. Step down from there was the Turanicium 2 human, angelic human. And they were seated on Tara, where the Orpheum were seated on Gaia and in the Sirius star system and in the Lyran star system. And then the Turanicium 2 were seated in the Taran time system. Tara is the density 2 counterpart of Earth. That's dimensions 4, 5, and 6. And they're also time frames. Now they're simultaneous time frames. So you have these races and these parts of our races that exist right now in their space-time coordinates. They're still there just like we are here at this time. From the Turanicium 1s came the Turanicium 2s. The Turanicium 1 is the Taran Turanicium angelic human. the Ternicium-1 are the ones that came from there. Now, the Ternicium-1s on Tara had 24-strand DNA templates. They went from 24 to 12, and then the Ternicium-1s had, I keep getting 1s and 2s. 1s were first, 1s were on Tara. They had 24-strand DNA, 24 to 12. And then out of them came the Ternicium-2s, the second experiment. And that was the Earth humans, the angelic humans of Earth. But they were also put here with Oriphimes. The Orifim were the indigo children who were called the Magi. They were the Magi Gray line that were put on the planet to protect the angelic human races, the Ternicium races. So together we could all heal the Templar here and finish the mission. The mission has been here for a long, long time. And the mission was, when it was originally agreed by the high councils of the Christos founders races, there's a decision to be made 250 billion years ago. Do we close the Phantom Matrix now and stop it from getting any worse? Or do we keep it open to try to help these races evolve back out? Because if we close it, they're gone, and their evolution will lead them into space dust, which is okay. I mean, they are still a part of God. But when you go back as space dust, you don't go back and go back up. You are still within the hologram. You become part of the substance of the dimensional field within the time matrix that you got stuck in. So if your template gets fragmented, you end up as little tiny pieces of scalar waveforms with your consciousness not being able to talk to itself anymore. And you go back to dust, as they say, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. You go back to consciousness dust, and you don't go fully back out of the matrix. You'll be the substance that something else comes into the matrix, evolves through. You will evolve back through another form, but you won't recognize yourself as what you originally came in with. So it was a big decision. Do we make sure they can't cause any harm? Because like to blow up Stargate 12 and the Divine Blueprint in the Time Matrix is not a small thing. That was the point of original sin, and it was created by the Anu Elohim races. And that's why it even ended up in our Bible way down here this long. Yeah, since that time, it's even come all the way through history to this point. The decision was made to keep the Time Matrix open, the Phantom Matrix open, to see how many of them we could evolve back out. Because there were several races that weren't intended to go. One of the races that wasn't intended to go are called the Odedicron reptilians. They were out of the Seraphim family. They weren't the Draconians. Now, Draconians are called Omicron Draconians. They are different than reptilians. They have partial reptilian gene code at this point, but they started out as dragon moths. So they're like a reptile moth type being, and they evolved a lot of things out of there. They were the original fallen Seraphi race. But in the mess that was taking place in Lyra 250 billion years ago, when these wars were happening, the Odedicron reptilian races lived on the same planetary system in Vega Lyra, that the fallen Draconian ones lived on. And when the Draconians tried to fight back against the Anu Elohim from Stargate 11, which was on a planet called Avion in Lyra, they ended up getting sucked into the black hole with the Omicron and with the Anu Elohim. So it was primarily because of the Odedicron races that had not wanted, they were still Emerald Covenant. They hadn't done that on purpose. They just got stuck between a rock and a hard place and ended up in a black hole. A lot of it was, when you size it up, it was basically, that's what happened to them. And there was great love from the founders' races for all of them, even the ones of their own who had tried to destroy them. I mean, it's like having a child that goes crazy. You still love the child, but you have to do something or it's going to blow up the house and assassinate the neighbors and that kind of thing. And you may love it, but at some point you've got to restrain it or something before it, because it's not helping itself by doing those things either. So there was a lot of love. The decision to keep the matrix open was a decision of love, and it wasn't a decision that had to be made. There was absolute justification at that time to close the matrix. To say, you guys made a choice. You were warned about what that choice would do. Now you've harmed yourselves in a big way. Who are you going to blame? Now, they blamed High Council. Well, if you had destroyed the Draconians like we asked you to, we wouldn't have had to blow up your Stargate, right? This is the mentality. What's scary, did you ever listen to, lately, the conflict in the Middle East? Did you ever hear these people debate each other on TV when they have the representatives of the Palestinian side and the representatives of the Israeli side? Some of them carry that attitude. It's like, well, you made me do it. I have to go keep blowing people up because you make me do it. It's like, wait a minute, who's going to take some accountability for your own actions here? The whole argument goes way, way back. Yeah, there are races all over this 15-dimensional matrix and phantom matrix that have these attitude problems where they don't want any responsibility for their choices. So they blame, and if you can blame somebody, then you've made a target for yourself. So you don't have to grow. You have to go and pick on them and try to suck their energy and mess them up, and then you feel vindicated. This is what has created the whole situation of perpetual warring. But anyway, we have a problem still with phantom matrix. It was left open because of love, and because that there's always, and it's still an attitude that's very much held by Christos races, where there's life, there's hope. You know, if it fell, it can rise again. You know, theoretically, anyway. And it was a big theory because Council had never. Council was a council of creator God beings that used to be ascended master beings that weren't in matter, that had decided that they would follow this imprint that Source created, that you could create matter systems, and this could be neat. This was new to them too. What do you do when that happens? Help. Who do you talk to? You call up to the Janus Ascended Master groups. I think we have a problem down here. Did you ever hear of this one before? Is there any other matrix that this happened to? And there had been. Not too often, but there were a few other time matrix systems that had that, and some of them completely and totally imploded, which creates a major problem of restructuring. Because if you put enough holes in something, eventually the air or the life force energy goes out and the whole pattern falls to chaos. Source can't allow that to happen, or the whole arena of the hologram would fall apart. So whenever it gets to the point where there's a black hole that's trying to eat everything around it, there has to be a point where Source itself will intervene and say, okay, the balances are going to be reset. At that point, that could have happened in this time matrix 25 billion years ago. And there's still a lot of debate in Council as to, see, there's one group that said, we told you so. We told you, just do it now. Right? When there's the other group, there's the other group of bleeding hearts. Oh, but where there's life, there's hope. Yeah, guess who was on that team? It's really funny. The reason I use the word light, love, and clueless a lot is because I spend a lot of my existence in the last 500 billion years in the light, love, and clueless space, which means, oh, if there's life, there's hope. Love it. Love it enough and it'll come back. Love it enough and it won't destroy you. Love it enough and it'll become good, even if it doesn't want to be. No, it won't. So there's a whole group of Council right now that kind of sits up there and goes, well, we don't like to say we told you so. We understand the love that you guys were coming from. And because it's a free will system, we honored your wishes. Happy now? Can we finish it now? The finishing has to do with simply resetting the divine blueprint completely. And that means opening the God world gates and allowing the frequency to come through that will put the regular mathematics back here that originally came here. But at this point, we should have done it before. When I look back and say, I was on that council, I said, oh dear, I really, really should have gone the other way. But it seemed so heartless. It seemed like, well, you have this handful of fallen angelic races that used to be our brothers and sisters. We love them. We don't want to abandon them. Might have been put them out of their misery and us too. Because right now, you not only have the original groups, you have billions of races that they've created. You have billions of hybrid races that they've created by coming through to this side and finding out ways to use artificial genetic engineering to combine the life forms from here with the life forms from there. We have allowed a mess to occur. And we had the greatest intentions in doing so. It was the intentions of love, and yes, you can heal it. We didn't know any better. You would think, theoretically, that whatever it is, if God made it, and God let it get broke, then God could fix it. Right? Well, some things, because of the order of the way the universe works, just the mathematics, the physics that are needed to create the hologram, some things are more easy to accomplish than others. Now, you can, if we did not have a free will time matrix here, if we wouldn't have been nullifying our own point by saying, okay, we're going to make them get better. Right? We're going to go in there, wipe their memory clean, put them back together, and then drag them out by the bootstraps. Right? Now, that's more like the things they like to do, those kind of things. That would have been a violation of the free will of those who chose to take that path. So we had to find ways of re-education and of assisting them with what's called bioregenesis, DNA template regenesis. Because if you have your DNA template shattered and you don't have a D12 imprint anymore, the concept of Christ consciousness means nothing to you. It's like a language you've never heard before. You can't feel the unity vibration that comes from the D12 pattern. You can go and kill something and say, oh, that's neat. Wow, look at that when it dies. Wow, look at that. So that's what happens, and feel nothing. The beings in the phantom matrix don't feel in the same way that beings on this side do. The ones who have crossed between the hybrid people have a little bit of each, which is even harder, because it's like having a demon that lives inside of you, an angel and a demon at the same time, where the angel feels, but it doesn't quite understand what it's doing, and the demon comes through and says, oh, I want to do that, whack. And it goes smacking things and, hurting things, and the other part says, oh, should I maybe feel bad there? So we're in the middle of this, middle of the end of a drama that has a huge history attached. The history in terms of our planet itself is long and exhausting enough. We've brought a lot of that through, and a lot of that's going to go in the Forbidden Testaments of Revelation. Because when you see the history, you kind of go, oh my God. Oh, that's what they didn't tell us in history class in school. It gives you a whole different perspective on what's taking place. Right now we can watch the TV and look at the Palestinian-Israeli drama. We can look at the dramas that are happening in Africa or happening in Argentina. I mean, people all over the place have always been fighting on this planet. This is not natural. This is not normal, but it's become how things usually go in this time matrix. What we have no memory about anymore is realizing, oh, when you watch the situation on TV, oh yeah, they're the ones they're working the Drac agenda, and okay, these guys are working the Anunnaki agenda. They always hated each other. Of course they're fighting. We look at people, and we call them humans, and we say they're fighting because they can't figure out how to like each other. And of course, where there's life, there's hope. Somewhere there must be a way to get them to like each other. Maybe build a wall between them for a while, and eventually they can learn to not hate each other's guts. Yeah, they're going to try that probably in the Middle East. Bless them. They'll have holes in the wall after a while, just like we had holes in the wall we put between here and the Phantom Matrix. We're on a planet that has, it's like, anybody ever see Star Wars and the Star Wars bar scene? Where they had things of all sorts hanging out at the bar, right? It was classic, because there's a point in time when you start to get your eyesight back, your inner, your ancient eyes start to really open, where you walk into a room and you realize we're walking on, this is like the Star Wars bar planet. Okay? Things wear human masks here. And what's scary is, a lot of us wouldn't know. And gee, am I human? Now that I think about it, I never asked myself that question, right? If I took off my human mask, would I be an Orifeme, which is what an Orifeme or a Ternicium? Would I be a human, or am I something else? We're taught here to amalgamate the concept of humanity as one race that's bipedal and it kind of looks like this, and it's all one thing and always was. That isn't the way it is here. We all have, we may be of different races, that's fine. There's a lot of Lyran Syrians running around right now. If Orifeme put on their full clothing, they'd be 12 feet tall and look very, very different, and they'd be considered pretty strange compared to most people. We'd look pretty weird. So would most of you. I can see it if they remove the stuff in the grids that are keeping the gene code here, and everybody within a week morphed back into their original self. You wouldn't have enough psychiatric wards, because you'd walk into the bathroom in the morning to wash your face and go, ah! And everybody would be doing that everywhere with each other and themselves. But the truth is, right now, we're wearing a mask of humanity. All of us are. And on the surface, you can't tell who's from where or what their agenda is. But in truth, all of the agendas that we're seeing running, all of the things that are happening in our daily lives now that are going to become more and more in our faces as we go through the next 10-year period, these are all about politics that have to do with three primary groups. One are the Omicron Draconians, another are the Anunnaki or Anu Elohim races, and the third one, and they're pretty much the ones that are most overlooked, are the Guardian races. They figured they had us neutralized a long time ago, so there's not enough of us on the planet to cause a problem. So the fight that's happening right now, that we're watching evolve right now, has to do with a very ancient battle, a battle that was scripted in Atlantis to take place, but it was put on hold because of a stalemate with the stellar activation cycle there. It's a battle of dominion between the Anu Elohim forces and who are working that, those agendas, and the ones who are working the draconian agendas. There's a third player in this, but they've always kind of been a part of it, and we'll talk about them when we get into the Metatronic thing. They're called the Wisadek races. They were from a different black hole system, and they joined forces with the ones from Phantom. So we'll talk about them more. What I want to, in the Metatron workshop, but tonight what I want to do is just touch a bit on, since we're in the places of, where the Minoan remnants of their places are and those kind of things. It would be nice to find out, where do these fit in our history? I was kind of glad that I didn't have to get into this when we had our guides with us before, especially the First Lady. I figured she'd probably push me over a cliff by the time I was done, bless her. Because she's really into the mythological god things, and that's fine. And it's very romantic, the mythologies involved with the gods. We have Zeus and Apollo and all these wild love affairs, and they did some really wacky things. I mean, if you read the mythologies, they were marrying each other's brothers and sisters. Some were having babies with their own fathers, mothers. I mean, it was like anything was fair game with these guys. And it was okay because the gods did it. So there was a period of fun, you might say, in the psychosis of human evolution. But these guys came from somewhere. These mythologies came from someplace, just as did the Christian mythologies and the Hebrew mythologies, the things that we base so much of our lives on, cultures on right now. Very rarely are we taught to think, first of all. We're taught to absorb information as it's presented to you and follow it, period. And as long as you behave, you'll be socially acceptable. You might be able to have a job, and at least if you're in a more developed country, you'll be able to eat, have a home, and have a functional little, probably meaningless, but at least you'll be able to occupy yourself life. This is what we're taught. We are not taught to sit in history class and they say, yes, the pyramids were built by many people dragging very large rocks up ramps. You're not taught to think, wait a minute, how many people did it take to do that? And you're definitely not taught to think, well, gee, are you sure they did it that way? Maybe they levitated them. You're not allowed to think. You're not taught to think here. We're taught to regurgitate history and basic things that make us functional, like math and science, and things that we can be put to work as good little soldiers. And we're happy because we think we're free, or, well, at least in America and in the free countries, we have that. And even the other countries don't even have that. But we're not taught to look deeper into what's happened here. If we look at our history and what we're told is the way history has unfolded, you would not believe the holes in these stories. If you look at the line of history, oh yeah, these guys came from here, we think they came from over there, and then they raided these guys, and they became these guys. It's like, oh really? Where'd they come from? I don't know. We think they came from over there. Well, it might have been over here. Who knows, right? And then, of course, you go back to Darwin, and it's like, where'd we come from? I don't know. First we thought they might have been apes. Now we think we might have come from fish. I don't know. We're not really sure either. But it's this way. They don't have the answers. They have guesswork. They have pieces of things they found from the past that they try to put together and make a puzzle out of to tell us what our life is about, where we came from. And we are told to simply accept that this guesswork are the facts that you're going to build your life on. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you. The history here is much longer and much more intense than anything we have encountered. When they've been giving us progressively the history over the last 3 years, I've hit points of overwhelm where it is that I don't want to know anymore. Enough. The stuff in Lyra, that was enough. At least that's a long time ago and far, far away. But when you start to bring it into Atlantis, this is where it got really touchy for me, because there's a lot of pain still wrapped around it. There's a lot of us here. If we're here now, it's because we were here during the Atlantean period. There's nothing new on this planet. It's all been recycling because it couldn't get out of here because of what happened in Atlantis. So there's a history that took place primarily from 25,500 BC forward. That's what's directly affecting us now. There were other things that affected us before that. There were 2 extinctions of the human races on Earth because of war with the Anunnaki races primarily. And it's really funny. If you look at the New Age movement, one of the things that you'll find is any of them that acknowledge that there's other races, they acknowledge there's Anunnaki, and they acknowledge that there's draconian-type races. The Anunnaki always make the Dracs out to be the bad guys. And they're the good little saviors that'll come in. They're the ascended masters that'll come in and help you. Just give your power here. They're the ones that have learned the art of seduction. They've learned that you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. So they give you whatever it is you might want. And they do it in a loving, soft, melodic voice. And usually with very pretty faces. And they'll heal your little thingy that might be wrong. And they'll help. They'll even promise you lottery tickets, but very, very rarely will they deliver on those. These guys are the ones coming from the Anu Elohim, or the ones coming from the races that interbred with the other races, from the fallen matrix, the other fallen time matrix, the Wesadite matrix. We're in the middle of a con job that's unbelievable. If we get to a point where we think, oh my God, there actually might be these other factions of life forms out there. You have the people of the ET movement, or they know things are flying around the skies. I mean, there's enough stuff on video at this point. Like, we're all making it up? I don't think so. But they're the ones that, like, they're saying, oh, what is this? They watch the New Age guys who are often like white robes dancing around in circles, which they do have a reason for dancing around in circles. At least we know that. But there's this whole division happening between these people. Each side thinks the other's totally wacky. That neutralizes both sides. And meanwhile, you have mainstream people walking around in a total daze, where none of it's real. We know that. I mean, didn't you read Darwin's book? Didn't you read this? Didn't you read that? Yeah, we read it, and we don't like it. The history is coming toward us whether we want it or not. The past is coming back. Atlantis is rising, and we're walking around in the middle of it. There was a whole series of events that took place between 25,500 BC and, let's say, 100 years ago. There was a script that was step by step enacted. It was a script that came out of an agreement called the Luciferian Covenant. The Luciferian Covenant was an agreement that involved some of the hybrid races. I won't go into the story of the Leviathan races right now. I've covered that in other workshop material. But it was a hybrid experiment that was to help the fallen races. They got in here through hybridization because we let them, because where there's life, there's hope. That's one of those shoot the horses, don't they? Yes, that was a dumb thing to do. But they were allowed in. And there's lots of them running around the planet right now. And most of them don't know that they're that. So they're just as innocent and clueless as the rest of us, right? So you can't blame them for it. But anyway, we're in a situation of history that has evolved through some significant periods. If we go to the history of this area has been like a combat zone for ages and ages because there's a lot of connections here to Stargate 5, which is a gate connection directly to Tara in Density 2. And there's also other things here. There's control grids that have been put in here, particularly in 22,326 BC. The turnstiles have been concentrated in these areas of what used to be Ionia. There's also a bunch of them up in England, which used to be Lohas Atlantis. They're positioned all over the planet. But this place, like many others where that were related to gate areas, has been a place of constant, one group gets in, another takes it over. One other group gets in, another takes it over. The influence that's been here primarily, no matter how hard the Anunnaki races tried, the Dracs still held this one. This was one of theirs that they weren't going to let go. When I say the Dracs, the people that have been used, the people who have been used, the Leviathan races, we call them the Illuminati races, that these are races that are born. They're in human form like everybody else, but they're not born with a Christos spark because they were conceived out of a generation of Leviathan races that didn't have the Christos spark. What inhabits those beings are souls from the fallen matrix, from the phantom matrix. Now, they don't know that when they get here. The phantom matrix uses their people as expendable bodies to get their presence on planet, and they don't care much for their own races, so they don't take care of them. That's why there's a lot of Illuminati people here. The people they beat up on most of is usually themselves. They don't take very good care of their own peoples. Now, we've all evolved to a point where people are trying to take care of each other, whoever you're from, down here, which is the saving grace element, where you're almost tempted to say, where there's life, there's hope. You can help them all. That one again. I know a lot of people that are Illuminati, that were born in the Illuminati pattern, and they didn't, on a conscious level, choose to do this. They just found themselves created in bodies, and they grew up, and they have a childhood that they remember, and they don't remember anything else before that, and that kind of thing. But these races have been used like puppets by the fallen angelics who created them. And because of their human imprint, even if it's very small, they don't have a full Christic imprint yet. They don't have 12 strands. But the Leviathan races received 5 strands. They received 5 strands of the human angelic, one at a time. This is where we got our going from Neanderthal man up to like Cro-Magnon and eventually into what we call the Homo sapien. That wasn't our evolution. That was their evolution, because they had a basic ape hominid form that was created by using certain elements of, I think, monkeys from here and some of their own race strains. And we took that form, well, when they entered the Emerald Covenant, that form was used to begin splicing in, little bit at a time, the strand templates from the angelic human race to give them the ability to evolve into a form they'd never had before, but a form that would allow them to eventually, if they could regenerate 5 strands over many generations, they could then leave here. This 5th strand activation would allow them to go through the stargates here to get to density 2. You could get them off Earth, get them out of here already, because they had been causing problems here. It was because of those races that the human race fell twice here and was destroyed and had to be reseeded. So it was like, fine, get them evolved, get them out of here, get them up to Terra where we can handle them better and help them on their next stage. They were on a program of evolving to 12-strand evolution so they could get their 12 strands back. But they got hijacked in the middle of it. The races that they had originally incarnated out of, it was like there was a rebellion in Phantom Matrix. A whole bunch of races, fallen races, decided they didn't want to be fallen anymore. They decided they wanted to work their way back and not play, the fallen angelic game anymore. Forget Masters of the Universe. This isn't fun anymore. Basically, we don't like it here. And they entered, once they were in incarnation, they had the ability to make a choice to join the Emerald Covenant. They could make a choice that if they were in a form, any form at all, even an animal form here, they could transfer their soul out of the animal form here and into one of these hybrid races that would give them an evolutionary path. It wasn't going to be, you're going to get there tomorrow. It was going to be, you're going to work your way back out. That's the only way you can do it, is to rebuild the template. So they agreed to come in. They're not born with a Christos spark, but they're born with the potential to regenerate it. It makes them, the Illuminati races, even like in the past and now, have a weakness genetically. It's a weakness that allows them more vulnerability. They can be messed with easier. They're like little puppets because of their gene codes. It's like having little black holes in the DNA template. They can literally, if there's a consciousness from the fallen matrix that wants to mess with them, they can move right into their bioenergetic fields and impulse them to do things. If they really want to get themselves into that body, they can very easily push the other consciousness out and take possession of the body. So the Illuminati races are an endangered species, and they don't even know it. They're usually too busy, though, going on Dominion quests down here, because they still carry the same consciousness distortions as the collectives from which they incarnated. They still have a warring mentality. I mean, there have been beings that our governments and certain governments have been approached by what would be considered ETs that offer them certain options since the 1930s and said, well, you can fight this out, but it's not going to work. You're not going to win this way. Why don't you try this? This is the peaceful way to do it. This is the way to protect your planet. And those the people who were in the governments that were being run at the time by the Illuminati said, no, we don't like it your way. We want to do it the peaceful way. You won't give us guns and weapons. We won't talk to you. So they sided with the negative sides. We're in a situation at this point. It's a culmination of the history from Atlantis. The history from Atlantis is very sad. There are repeatedly the places that we've been guided to. There's a layer of history that belonged to indigos and humans, that belonged to us. And most of it was quite sad, because we were continually tracked and persecuted from the Leviathan races. The Leviathan races, or the Illuminati races, that had originally been part of the bioregenesis experiment, were originally not, guys that had gotten in trouble but were trying to rehab. They were trying to be good guys, but they got messed with in Atlantis by the fallen angelics. In Atlantis, you had spaceships flying here. It was common knowledge that ET beings existed. So it was no big deal for them to come in and, like for various different races to come in and interact directly with the peoples. The races that, from the Phantom Matrix, that they weren't supposed to be able to come in here. There was what was called a wall in time that was put up about 5.5 million years ago. It was a frequency barrier between Phantom Matrix and this side, because they were continually invading over here. They were able to poke holes in it and come back and forth. And in Atlantis, they were able to come in enough to where they used seduction. The Anunnaki races used seduction to convince their Illuminati races, their Leviathan races, that they would never be accepted by the humans the humans didn't really care about them because they weren't of them. They get in that whole trip. And it wasn't true. I mean, the angelic humans and the founders wouldn't have got involved if they didn't love them in the first place. They wouldn't have taken the risk of, allowing them to come in. But if you don't have the Christic imprint, if you don't have that D12 frequency that will allow you to feel the bigger picture, it made them scared, and it made them not know who to trust. And if there were ones that were having a hard time, the Anunnaki would fix it for them. They became very dependent on the Anunnaki to fix things for them, because the Anunnaki could do magic compared to what the Leviathans could do. So could the angelic humans. But the angelic humans had something called rules. That means, yes, we can create that, but it would cause harm here, here, and here, so we won't create that. Where the Anunnaki came in and said, you can create anything. See, you can become like us. And that was very seductive. When the Leviathan races went over, there was this whole thing. And it's funny where we talk about the gods of Rome and Greece, where these guys came from. They came right out of Atlantis. And where they come from Atlantis, they came right out of the Phantom Matrix, unfortunately. When we get into the Metatronic workshop, we'll see the names of some of the planets in Phantom Matrix, and it's really funny. I mean, we have like Apollyon. That's one of them. There's a number of others that you can see where the gods of Olympus came from. It's more like saying, hi, my name's Earth because I come from there. You know what I mean? It was kind of like that. And there's whole mythologies built on some of the interactions, but between peoples, between groups of peoples. Like in the mythologies, there's a lot of everybody sleeping with everybody else. I mean, it was just like, a heyday of fornication in those mythologies. This was really talking about what groups were interacting and interbreeding with with other groups. When it came to the point where we have ancient Atlantis, we have a bunch of things that happened there. Then there was this big blank spot that I'll talk about in a minute, and then there was this other evolution where we have cultures that seem to have popped up, what we call our most ancient cultures. We have cultures that obviously built the pyramid things down there in Egypt. We have the Minoan civilizations here. We have the remnants in China of temples. We have the remnants in South America of temples. There's remnants all over the place. So our people on this side that don't have any memory anymore and the books aren't there anymore, and say, where these guys come from? Where did they come from? It's just we were apes once and eventually we'll learn how to build pyramids? I don't think so. But when it comes to this area, and this is what I want to kind of like bring into focus for our workshop for tonight, is just getting a feel for this area and the influences that, and you can see it with the people too. The people here that we've met are very much steeped in the mythologies of this place. This is their history, and they're proud of it. They're proud of it because it gives them one thing that standard history out there doesn't. It gives them more ancient roots, and it gives them a connection to something real in the sky. Whereas you have, people that are just Christian who hope there's, Mary and Jesus and Joseph and all the saints and those guys if you're Catholic up there. There's a thing, there's a romance about the gods from here, the gods from Greece and Rome. These guys, first of all, they were very sensuous. They allowed you to have sensual pleasures. It was okay to have bodies and do things with them. Where if you get into the heavy Christian dogma, that's not okay anymore. I find it really amazing because it's very Christian here now, very Catholic. There's a very strong Catholic imprint. But you also see statues of men naked standing in the lobbies of hotels. And that's like, for an American, that's kind of like, oh, you kind of just check over your shoulder, oh, like it's, maybe a beautiful work of art. But I would, if I had a statue like that, even a little one, in my living room and people came into my house, I'd blush every time they looked at it. I'd be embarrassed because that's the stuff that we're at least in America, that's what we're taught, just to be, a little too puritanical. It's an amalgamation here of cultural influences. And there's a pride, though, that I've been feeling in the people. And I didn't know this because I haven't been to Greece since before it was Greece. That's not true. I was here when it was still Greece, but a very, very long, long time ago. But there's an amalgamation of the God orientations. You have these ancient things. They don't know where they came from yet. They still have words. Like one of the decks on the boat, the ferry we were on, was the Atlantis deck. Another was the Orion deck. I mean, it's interesting. these words are woven into the culture. You have their Lady Gaia here. That was a goddess person, the earth goddess, yes, but it's up there. City 3. It's amazing to see how it came from Atlantis, because in Atlantis you had delegations. Once they had opened the portals here and could get into this system and come and visit. Now, there was things like Syrian Council and various other guardian councils that were doing their best to guard the portal system, to not let these guys in, because they would always create war when they came in. If they didn't come in and try to just decimate everybody completely and just take it over, they'd use seduction and try to get interior rebellion to take it over for them, which they've been trying to do for a long time, and they still are. In Atlantis, the whole Greek and Roman god mythology was set, but part of this mythology was also Egyptian. Originally, the Egyptian gods, the gods that became the gods of Egypt, like Thoth and all those guys, and Osiris and Horus and all of those, they sat right alongside the gods of Olympus. They were all part of the same pantheon of gods. They were all the same people, races, coming from other places. And there was this whole subservience thing taught in Atlantis. This was when the temples were getting very, very corrupt, and where originally the temples belonged to the Magi Grail line, angelic humans and indigos, but they were progressively forced out by the Leviathan races. And many times it was force. It was like, we'll destroy you, and they did, and took over the temples. And, it's like, yeah, they can do that, can't they? Yeah. Fortunately, we know we're immortal. We have to do another body, but at least we know, we're immortal. When they set up a structure of subservience there, this is where the heavy God's up here, you're down here and lowly, you want to have things your way, you don't have any power, but we do, and as long as we're happy with you and you kiss up to us, we'll do it for you. This is where the transfer of power was heavily, heavily ingrained into the Leviathan races. They were told they were utterly powerless, and that was demonstrated in certain ways by making them powerless. Stick them over here someplace on the planet, and then have big bad storms come and get them, and then have something come down and say, we control the storms, which they did. They could control, by the crystal technologies, the dome. We call it the dome here. It's a natural hydrosuspension field that was very actively controlled consciously in Atlantis. It was set up with apparatus that had to do with massive crystals that were buried underground in relation to the Stargate lines, and you could, ley lines, and they were able to generate, somewhere in one of the texts, one of the obscure little details of stuff for one of the books, I don't know which one it's going to go in, they explain the hydrosuspension fields and how they worked, and what they did with ions in the atmosphere and that kind of thing, and how it allowed them climate control. And as long as that was working, climate control worked. But right now, there's only little parts of that are still operational. But the people of Atlantis were set up in a situation where they began to worship these big guys that came down from the sky in their fancy little ships, or some of them would pop in through portals and that kind of thing. And that's, if you can't do it and they can, that's real impressive. Like, if me and us could appear and disappear before you, you'd be like, whoa, yeah, well, listen to these guys. They know something we don't, right? Yeah. And we're working on it with you. We can tell you how to do it, but we can't do it yet either. But we can tell you the mechanics. But these were the games that were being played. Right now we have things like crying statues and those kind of things that are happening. It's the same people that are doing them. The ones that are making Mother Mary statues cry and blood come out of the hands of crucifixes and these kind of things. This is all holographic insert technology. And this is the stuff that was used to pull the wool over the eyes of the Atlantean peoples. And it got to the point where there was one of the biggest reasons, I think, that the Olympian gods were very much into fornication and all sorts of other things that would produce children, was because the more of them there were, the more they would have an army to take over. And it was, go forth and multiply over and over and over again. And we don't even care who you do it with. Just make lots of them, right? It started in Atlantis. And you had competing groups of fallen angelic races. Like Zeus's crew might not like Apollo's crew for 2 centuries or something, So they compete with each other, and they wouldn't let them intermarry with each other, and they'd There was a manipulation going here that if you read the Greek mythologies, it was really that bad. To the point where, yes, there were these big gods from the sky that were pulling strings, and they'd do nasty stuff if you didn't, sacrifice to them and that kind of thing. The Greek mythology, the Roman mythology was true, and that is in that sense. there really were these big people up there. And that's something that I think that I felt here with the little bit of the Greek people that we've met. A part of them knows this. They know there is a truth to those stories, where in America it's like, oh yeah, the Greek mythology stuff, you know. It's like, it's neat, it's romance, it's like, you know, fairy tale, you know, that kind of thing. These guys know it wasn't fairy tale. They know there was some substance to it. That substance became mythology after a key moment in time. It was in 9558 BC. That is a point in time when the groups of different Leviathan races on the orders of their fallen angelic kin from the Phantom Matrix orchestrated the flood, the great deluge. That was the great house cleaning period. There were a couple of times from that point going up further to like 3470 BC. This was another point in time that there was a significant thing that happened that led to what we call the cultures here, the Minoan culture. This is where they begin to fit into the picture. I'll start with 3407. What became the Minoan people weren't just the Italic peoples. They were peoples that came just here to hide. They came in exile from Atlantis because progressively, since the flood, it was chaos. But even before the flood, you had an influx of indigo children, particularly Magi Grail lines, because they were really after them. If they could find a Magi line, first thing was to force the women to breed so you could get a baby that had the codes and then get rid of the rest of the Grail line. You know. So since the flood of 9558 BC, there had been a progressive exodus of movement of the Ionian, of the Magi Grail lines into various regions. Some went to France, some in what we call France, and I think it was called Gaul then, but it was, some went to France, some went literally went down into the Middle East area, some are in Afghanistan, and some went over into this area. The ones that went into this area, that's called Greece now, were of the Celtic Druidic descent. Now, Celtic Druidic, it was Celtic and Druidic, just like you had Toltec and Olmec, okay? These were Atlantean tribes of the 12 tribes races. They were a Grail line. The Druidecs were the Magi Grail line that went with Tribe 3 of Nohasa, Atlantis, which is now what we call Bermuda. What's left of it is called Bermuda. The Celtacs were Tribe 11, Magi Grail line, and they were the ones that we call the Irish now. And the whole history of Ireland, we went through that a bit, where they say, there were these like wild blue raider races that went and like conquered territories. These weren't the Irish people. These were the Leviathan raiders that came in and took over the race identity of the Irish people. The same thing happened here. The Italic people were not originally warriors. They were turned into warriors and trying to defend themselves from what was happening here. But before we had the buildings that we saw, like today at Knossos, the big palaces and those kind of things, there were civilizations here that for a while were actually peaceful. Because for a while, Ionia became a haven where we were being chased out of other areas, where gate conquests were going down for Gate 11 up in England and for various other gates, Gate 10 down in Iran, and there's a bunch of questing going on for Gate 8, I believe, in China. And so there's a lot of everybody run this way, because the Leviathans are going that way, right? And we were able to set up small pockets, and this is why we were able to survive to the point where we can have an indigo Grail line on the planet right now, and where you can have an angelic human Grail line left, is because we would do it in small pockets, and they'd be scattered all over the place. So there wasn't any one big concentration of them where somebody could come in and wipe out the whole bunch. There would still be somebody left to carry the race line. This was one of the places that in fact, where that temple, the Knossos Palace, sits, was a place that we had one of those small civilizations where, for a time, and it was funny, I was getting memories on that one when I was sitting there. It was like, oh, neat. Yeah, we came there knowing we were going to probably become extinct, but as long as a few of us could go and escape, it would be fine, and that was all part of the divine plan. At least you know where you fit in the universe. But there was something called the Knights of Knossos. The Knights of Knossos were the raider races that came in here. And it's very interesting because they're still going strong. And so are the ones they used to fight with, which are the Knights Templar. The Knights of Knossos were draconian. They were They were of the Leviathan races they're from Atlantean period, who were working for the Omicron Draconian races, which were the ones from Orion, that were against the Anunnaki races. For ages, but ever since the original thing 250 billion years ago with the Lyr and Elohim Wars, where the Anu Elohim wanted to destroy the fallen Seraphi Seraphim, which were the Draconians came out of. They didn't like the Dragon Moth guys. So they still don't. And what you had was the Knights Templar were spreading all over the place. They were raiding the angelic human and grail lines, and they were forcing interbreeding between their own races to produce lines of children that progressively had more and more of the grail line coding. The grail line DNA coding is what went with the planetary grids. Humans and angelic humans and the indigo children have DNA that is mathematically coded to the mathematical scalar template of the planetary shields. We could run the Templar. We were given that as a gift because we were the ones appointed as the guardians of this planet. And the Leviathan races, if they were ever going to take over this planet and actually be able to run the Stargates, they had to be able to access the Stargates, the security coding in the Stargates. They needed the gene code. So they couldn't just come in, flatten everybody, and take it. They had to progressively infiltrate from within and build up a master race that would hold because it raided so many. They had to get every one of the 12 tribes of angelic humans. They had to pick up the coding of every one of them, at least to some degree, for them to be able to fully access the grids enough to completely take them away, to completely reverse them, to take them into the Phantom Matrix. So it's been a long and progressive, what we've watched in our history is a long and progressive infiltration in the most personal of ways. I mean, they would literally send their raider races into a culture or a town, and they would kill most of the men, and they would rape the women, and they would keep them only until they gave birth, then they would kill them too. And they would keep the children and have their own women raise them. And there was this is just a horrible way to be. They wonder why we don't want them to, keep doing what they're doing. They wonder why the council will never approve of the way they want to run their free will matrix. So in this particular time period, where after the flood, 9558 BC, between that period and 3470 BC, there was a lot of wacky things happening. You had a whole bunch of Leviathan races that decided to follow the agenda of the Draconian races, because the Draconian races had started to incarnate into the Leviathan form, which is primarily an Anunnaki form when it started in Atlantis. They'd started to incarnate into that. So now you had Draconian Leviathans and you had Anunnaki Leviathans, and they didn't like each other. Okay, so you had progressively, the Anunnaki were the dominant ones. They have 11 strands of what we call reversed DNA template, as opposed to the 10 strands of the Draconian. So they have a little bit of genetic one-up on you kind of thing. Where Draconians would approach things with just go in your face and dominate you. I'm going to take that. Right? The other ones went, hi, how are you? Wouldn't you like to give that to me? Whole difference. There's a sophistication, a manipulation with that extra 11, that 11th reverse strand. So there was a conquest going on, and the Draconian races ended up with their strongholds in Rome. And this is really where the Anunnaki tried to come and take that away, because this is where the gods became very useful. The Roman and Greek gods, they kind of popped up around the same periods of time. And there were periods of time when, because the Anunnaki were so busy taking over Egypt and taking over other places, like all those wonderful temples over there in Egypt, they're very much Anunnaki architecture. The whole thing that we call the pharaonic line, there was maybe out of all of those pharaohs, 5 that were actually human or indigo. The rest of them it was a takeover, part of the takeover agenda. And because the Anunnaki Leviathan races were doing so well in their territorial conquest, it was really upsetting the Draconian races. So they tried really, really hard to create their own, go forth and conquer and breed and make many more, right? And kill those guys while you're at it. So what we ended up with was much of the Draconian ones started to come this way, where the others were busy, raiding other areas. They came over into Greece and into Italy and Ionia. They took over Ionia. And that was like the last place where all the indigos and the angelic humans were hiding. Like, uh-oh, here they come. Well, it could be worse. Could be the Anunnaki, right? Because they were more sophisticated as far as, they were a force to contend with because they were smart and they were quick and they were sharp, where there was a little dullness in the draconian consciousness that was a little easier to deal with, pretty straightforward. Yeah, it has a knife, it'll try to stab you, you know. It won't try to give you the knife and then shoot you from behind, you know, which is more the Anunnaki style. So anyway, the civilizations of the Grail Lines that were, you know, holed up in little areas in the islands, in the Greek islands and things, they knew the time would come because they knew what was happening. They still had the Atlantean records. It was at the point where, even when Minoan civilization started, and it really started about 4,500 BC. It was not, you know, as far as what they call the Minoans now, there was stuff here before that. There were people here before that. There were Ionians here before the Grail Lines came in, and then you had the Grail Lines came in. So you really have like Celtic Druidic Greeks, and you have Ionian Italic Greeks, and these were the original, you know, some of the original people. Many of the people here, they don't know their history anymore, but they are them. You know, they still carry that original gene code. Many of them were from Rome as well, because Rome, there wasn't a division between Greece and Italy and in those days, but it happened because of the politics. That was all Ionia. Ionia actually stretched all over the place. It stretched up into, like, you know, up past the boot and over. I'd have to get a map to show you exactly where, but I can do that actually. I can give you a diagram on that for the Metatronic workshop. But anyway, when it comes to understanding the culture here, it's an amalgamation of a couple of different things, and primarily it's draconian. And you can see this in the way religion and law have evolved. Now, it started out as, you know, one of the 12 tribes, Tribe 5, the Iona to Attila, which was Tribe 5 of the angelic humans. Then you had all the Grail Lines running and hiding here amongst those tribes. And then you had the invasions of the draconian Leviathan that came in to try to find territories they could conquer to start building their forces so they could stand against the Anunnaki-motivated Leviathan races. And they became strong here for a while. They were called, originally they weren't called the Knights of Gnosis. We call them Knights of Gnosis because this is where one of their strong beds were, when they took over the civilizations that were here. And they began to take on, they were doing the same thing the Anunnakis were, the draconian Leviathans were doing the same thing. The idea was to raid as many of the angelic human cultures as you could and get that gene code into your race line. Because whoever at the end of the game, and they knew the end of the game was going to be in the next stellar activation cycle, whoever had enough to run the planetary grids, you know, through the DNA template, would be the ones who got the planet. So it's been a progressive process of this. When the draconian races, or Leviathan races, came in here, they were guided in from several different places. You know, they were guided from above, from their gods, you know, and their gods from Atlantis. And these were the ones competing with people like Zeus and Apollo. They were the ones that didn't get along with Zeus and Apollo. They're the ones you don't hear too much about in Roman and Greek mythology. But they came in and they raided the Grail Line civilizations that were here, and they forced interbreeding on them, and they started to they interfaced with the culture and put down roots here. The Anunnaki didn't like this, so they sent their Leviathans in to raid, and this is where you ended up having what used to be draconian. If you look at Roman civilization and Greek civilization, once the raiding had started, it first was draconian in nature. And they have a certain agenda compared to the other agenda. They have a certain way of doing things. It's much more militant, much more kind of just in your face, bossy, pushy, you're going to do it my way or you're going to get killed kind of stuff, rather than, you know, I don't care if you're happy or not. Or the Anunnaki will try to seduce you because they know they can get more out of you if you're happy. Right? But you have the original cultures that were here, and then you have the draconian ones coming in and forcing their way in and building their temples over what used to be our temples, sometimes just taking our temples outright and saying, now it's ours. You know? Sometimes in the very ancient Roman days, they would come in, they would actually keep the structure and kind of like fire the staff, yeah, go kill it out back, and then dress up yours as the same ones. And people would come, our people would come, and they wouldn't, you know, realize that something had gone down. They'd take our names, they would take the names of our temples, and they would promote their own agendas through the temples that we had This happened with like the Temple of Artemis and this kind of stuff. They were originally good guys, but they turned them into something totally twisted. They'll probably do this with Azurite Temple too, by the way. Once we get through with the contact course and the Nephilim, start contacting the part of theirs that are going to send in as infiltrates, we'll have a whole like Azurite Temple Nephilim division, I'm sure. And this has been done all through the history, so be prepared for it. Don't be surprised when it happens. This has been happening all along. It happened all through Rome. It happened all through Greece. And it's kind of like one of those things. Well, eventually we know the drama's going to be over, so it's not a great thing, but you don't get too upset about it. Now, what happened here? Once the Draconians had invaded and started to create generations, building their master race that would have the gene code, this caught the attention, of course, of the Anunnaki races. Wait a minute, they're getting too strong over there. And there's a whole series of events that took place that centered around raiding of not just here, Anunnaki raiding of not just here, but also of the Mayan cultures in South America. Now, these are happening around the same time, and they're headed by somebody called Thoth. The Egyptian god Thoth. Well, he was also Hermes Trismegistus. I have a hard time saying that one. In the Greek mythologies. Is it Roman? It was Mercury in Roman. Yeah, he was known, that was associated with the Mercury god in Roman mythology, but Hermes Trismegistus. This was Thoth. Thoth, my old buddy. I say that because I know the being. The being is an immortal, and not because he has a Christos imprint anymore. He was appointed as he had joined Emerald Covenant. He was originally of the fallen races, did bioregenesis, got this close to becoming a Christed being again, and was put in charge of a whole bunch of the Leviathan races in the bioregenesis experiment. He was one of the first. He and Enoch were two beings that were entrusted to guide the Leviathan races back into their evolution. They were the ones appointed to oversee two different divisions of the Leviathan race experiment, and both of them at different times fell. And when Thoth fell in Atlantis, he took his privilege, and this happened in 22,326 BC. That's when he left the Emerald Covenant, and he took his Leviathan races and decided they would create a master race here, and that they would take over, and that's been going on ever since. So when you think, hear of the names like, Hermes Trismegistus, this was Thoth. When you hear about the guy who was a Quetzalcoatl, the one I can't pronounce, Quetzalcoatl, in the Mayan legends, this was the same person, and it was the same collective. The Thoth, the Thoth paradigm comes out of a place called Nibiru, or Nibiru. Nibiru used to be our 12th planet, and it isn't anymore because it got sucked into Phantom, and now it just comes through on a very strange orbit. We're going to talk about this in the Metatronic science things because we're going to have a little visit by a part of Nibiru that we really don't need to have a visit by. This is all coming to a head in this time period. But when we go back into the Greek culture and what it's evolved from, where these gods evolved from, when the Draconians got a stronghold over here, and in certain other places. They were also in South America because there are stargates over there. You have in Peru, you have Stargate, you have 5 and 7. Yeah, 5 and 7 are over there. And over here in Italy, you have Q-Site 5, which is Inner Earth Stargate 5. All right, so basically you have 12 stargates that are our stargates, and then 12 points called Q-Sites that connect to our stargates, but also directly to the Inner Earth stargates. And that's why when I said Italy with Tribe 5 would be settled wherever Gate 5 and Q-Site 5 was. All right, so this is how that works. It's in Voyages, if anybody hasn't read that. How the tribes were seated in relation to their stargates and to their Q-Sites was already in there. But anyway, there were these progressive, all right, the Dracs got this far, the Anunnaki were going to follow them. It started in Egypt, and this is why there's influences. You can trace the Egyptian influence over into Mayan culture, over into Incan culture, and those kind of things, and particularly Aztec. Aztecs were ones that got taken over by the Dracs, and the Mayas were ones that ended up getting taken over by the Anunnaki. So, and they were always like competing with each other. It happened here too, where you had certain groups of the original Italic people were taken over by the Dracs, and for a long time it became very Drac here, very Draconian agenda. And the Draconian agenda was about letting the Dragon Moth people from Orion, they would be the creator gods of the planet and kick anybody else out that didn't like it, that kind of thing. And the Anunnaki had their own version of that, they wanted to do that. But when the gods of Atlantis were brought back, they were brought back into Egypt, they were brought back into Mayan culture in South America, they were brought back into certain areas of China, and they were brought back here. And here they were brought back in the, let's say, clothing of the Greek and Roman mythologies, where the stories were told. And the stories were almost like tongue-in-cheek, some of them. I mean, they would tell the history, yeah, yeah, we'll put it that way. Isn't that funny? I can just see these guys, right in right. Now, there were history records that verified all of this stuff in its real context. After 9558 BC, those history records, most of them, were destroyed. They were destroyed on purpose because we had a big ET house cleaning. There were ships that came down after that flood, and those ships would use certain beams. They're called, which kind do they use? I'm just trying to see if they were, they call them hydrophonic. All right, there's a new kind. Hydrophonic beam ships. All right, and I'm just getting this in. They're actually giving me more detail on the technology. I knew it was, they would use the sonics, but this is a particular kind. It's a beam that if it's a wave, like a particle wave type thing, and if you beam it at an object, you can hit a frequency with it where it literally demanifests it. They wiped out a lot of what used to be ruins. I mean, I think ruins are here now. You should have seen what was here from Atlantis. Atlantis had beautiful, massive stone, buildings and temples that put these guys that are left to shame. But they got rid of anything that wasn't of their own. They got rid of everything that pertained to the history of the angelic humans. And they got rid of everything that pertained to anything that didn't fit into their stories, because they were writing a storybook. They were going to write a storybook to teach a race of children how to be very good, subservient little children forever. What had happened in 3470 BC? While you had civilizations here, you had this draconian and Anunnaki thing happening, and Grail lines trying to hide here and there and everywhere. There is, let's say that the second foot fell. If the first foot was 25,500 BC when they originally started to come in and mess with the DNA through the planetary grids, the next foot came in 3,470 BC. And this made a big difference. This is where it was like blank slate technology, test one. All right? Meaning they created alterations in the planetary grids again, using the Nibiru-Indadic crystal grid system, which is a sonic wave distribution system that can direct the electromagnetics of the planet. They crashed the grids again. This was in the Tower of Babel incident. We talk about that in the Voyagers book a bit. And they completely scrambled the languages at that point. Now, if you mess with the magnetic grids here, and science here is just starting to figure this out, that DNA is very sensitive to magnetic fields. So, if you mess with the magnetic field on a planet, you will alter the DNA. And the Anunnaki knew that. They went for a clean sweep in 3470 BC. They'd done the flood before that, but people were still remembering enough of the history. They still had oral tradition. They were speaking the Mahabharata texts, which were the books from the CDD plates, the founders' teachings. There were still enough Grail lines left that we were teaching our children, and they were teaching their children. They were spreading the word that this is what is really going on here. And it was starting to create rebellion in the Leviathan races, where they didn't want to follow their old creator gods that they had to worship things for and kill things and do that kind of thing. They were starting to listen. The Leviathan races were starting to listen to the Grey Line races and saying, yeah, I don't like living this way. I don't like having to cut heads off sheep all the time to make them happy. We don't have to do that? It's like, no. Oh, okay. So they were starting to listen and wanting to be re-educated. They were wanting to re-enter the Emerald Covenant. And this quite upset the fallen angelic races. Wait a minute, they're our soldiers. You can't have them. They orchestrated the Tower of Babel incident in order to, they almost caused pole shift, but didn't quite. It nudged it a little bit. I believe that's where we picked up our wobble from, the combination between that and the one from, where they did the flood. Before that, we got our wobble on our axis from that. But they created the mutation in the DNA by blocking certain things in the planetary grids. I'll explain this one really quick. There's something called vector codes in the DNA template, and there's supposed to be 12 vector codes in the whole DNA template, but they repeat in sets of 12, but they are the same, like 12 particular codes, each one for each of 12 dimensions. All right? The first thing they did in 25,500 BC was block out of the planetary grids 9 through 12. So it shut off that part of the DNA. What they did in 3,470 BC was they ran a polarization program through the planetary grids, which shut off another half, but first they polarized it. So you had 8 left. They polarized those and shut off half of each, leaving what's called a base 4 genetic alphabet. When that happened, it completely fragmented our memory banks. People literally woke up and didn't know who they were and didn't know how to speak anymore. They couldn't speak. They didn't have the sequencing for the languages that they used, the Atlantean languages. So they were ripe for the picking. They were ripe to come in and reteach them. The gods would come in and teach them new languages, and they would teach them new ways of being and how to worship them again. And that's what they did. It was planetary. It wasn't just here in Greece. It wasn't just in Egypt. It happened across the board. And this is where the indigos and the Great Lines ended up going down too. Our DNA was messed up too. We didn't remember either. So it was very easy. At this point, you have a bunch of people who used to be very intelligent that haven't a clue anymore. It's like they're all on Thorazine, walking around, and they don't even know how to talk anymore. They can't even talk to themselves, forget to talk to each other. Then progressively there was an infiltration. And at first it was very much run by visitation by them. Not so much spaceships, because it was agreed in Atlantis that if we get them to this point and we can get them under this much control, we don't want to teach them about spaceships and things. We'll be the gods that come down from the clouds, the heaven stories, this kind of stuff. They were going to fill out the realities. Now, we had teachings forever about the God worlds and those things, about those other matter density levels and those other higher spaces that a being can live in. We they were part of our teachings, the original angelic human teachings. So they took the best of our teachings as far as the framework, and they used it and filled in characters. And they created gods, and then they had their counter ones that created gods like Jehovah, and then you had there was all of these gods that we've come up with and that we've been raised with are, in truth, can be traced back to the names of very specific race lines of either Anunnaki or draconian nature. They weren't gods, because there's one thing that's amazing. People say, oh, well, you're against God. No. What we're against are false gods that run around saying people are supposed to be subservient. One thing the Emerald teachings never, ever, ever taught. You're not supposed to grovel. You don't sacrifice for some god. Why would a god be so powerless that would need you to do that? The ones that used to, the gods, that used to have, like, say, live animal sacrifice or live being, person sacrifice, you know why they did this? Because they needed to feed off the energy field of that being. If you kill something, particularly, like, traumatically, chop its head off, its soul energy goes, ah! Right? And it does. If you don't know how to die well and know it's coming, you kind of do an astral, ah! And when you're in that state, you can be sucked into an energy vortex and literally fed on, used as energy food. This is why they would do the sacrifices. This is why some of them would also have a very heavy dark sex culture attached to them. Because the same thing, and this is where our teachings can get really scary when you start to realize, what is that thing we call copulation? Oh, you don't really want to know. It's a great thing, but it opens the kundalini fields between people. So they used rape a lot, and they used, sexual dark arts a lot to feed energy to these creator gods that they were worshiping. The gods couldn't tap into their own life force energy. They're vampires. They had to feed energetically off other things. So they would get their Leviathan races to create sacrificial rituals so they could literally suck the life force energy out of the things that were killed. They would do this with the people as well as the animals and things. Now, they got more tame as things went forth. And it's interesting if you can watch how animal sacrifice kind of phased out as Christianity, as we sort of know it, started to phase in. Very interesting, because the Anunnaki were the ones who most liked to feed. Now they blame it on the Dracs, but there's mostly the Anunnaki who would feed through the sexual arts and through the sacrificial arts. The Dracs tried that to a degree. They did some of it. It was primarily an Anunnaki thing. When we look at Greece history, for example, you had the period of time where Dracs ran the show. Then you had the Olympian gods come in. You know, these were the Olympian gods with the Anunnaki and those guys. Then you had something happen to those guys. You ended up having the Byzantine movement come in. You ended up having Catholicism come back in. Now, Catholicism has to do with the Council of Nicaea, the ones who invented the Bible as we know it. Who wrote the Bible? Not God. No, the Council of Nicaea wrote the Bible by editing historical records. I'm not afraid to say that. Why? Because I'm mad. Because I've been taught the Bible was a book from God, and it wasn't. The original teachings that it was based on were from God, and they were holy. And they were taken out and edited, and then the Council of Nicaea decided it was going to run us around by the nose, pretending this book was something that somebody else wrote, that they really did. But this movement indicated something different was taking place. The Anunnaki had their heyday with their, gods running around having love affairs in the sky, and Poseidon made, Paxos, I believe, appear so he could have a place to put his mistress and all these wonderful things. It's really amazing how islands come to be, at least in Greek mythology or Roman mythology. Yeah, we're going to Paxos too. We'll talk about Paxos when we get there, but that has to do with it. It's an important gate Q site type place. But anyway, the shift was a shift back into draconian agenda. There's been a battle, a long-standing battle that started in Atlantis between the Attilan king lines and the Atlas king lines, and certain other versions of king lines that came out of both of those. It was like the two brothers that had a big fight. They were going